The smell hit Cole Hale before he saw the smoke. 3 miles out from his ranch, riding hard under a moonless sky, he caught it on the wind. Wood ash, burnt leather, something worse underneath. His horse sensed it too, ears flicking backward, nostrils flared. Cole didn't slow. He kicked harder, leaning low over the saddle, his gut already knowing what his mind refused to accept. The horizon glowed wrong, not the gentle amber of evening lamps, but the angry orange pulse of a structure burning itself out. By the time he crested the last ridge, the flames had mostly died, leaving only the skeleton of what used to be his home, ribs of blackened timber reaching toward a smoke-choked sky. Mara. Her name came out raw, barely a whisper. He was off the horse before it fully stopped, boots hitting dirt, stumbling forward through the wreckage. Heat still radiated from the collapsed beams. The barn was gone entirely, just a scorched footprint in the earth. The house, their house, the one he'd built beam by beam over 2 years, was a smoking wound. Mara! Nothing. Just the hiss and pop of dying embers, the groan of settling wood. Cole's hands shook as he pulled aside a fallen post, splinters biting into his palms. He didn't feel it. Everything was ash and ruin, unrecognizable. The table where they'd eaten breakfast that morning, the chair where she'd mended his shirts, the bed where... A sound stopped him cold. Faint. Barely there. A rasp of breath, wrong and wet. Mara? He found her 20 feet from the house, dragged or crawled there, he couldn't tell. Face down in the dirt, one arm stretched out like she'd been reaching for something. Her dress was torn, scorched black in places. Blood had pooled beneath her, soaked into the Wyoming clay. Cole dropped to his knees beside her, hands hovering, terrified to touch, terrified not to. I'm here. I got you. She didn't respond, wasn't moving. For one horrible second, he thought. Then her fingers twitched. A breath rattled out. Don't move, he said, already moving himself, hands shaking as he checked her over. Gash across her temple, deep enough to see bone, burns on her arms. Something wrong with the way her ribs sat. Too much blood, coming from too many places. Cole. Her voice was barely there, crushed gravel and pain. Don't talk. Save your strength. He was already stripping off his coat, pressing it against the worst of the bleeding. His mind raced, calculating. Town was 8 miles. Dr. Morrison, if he was sober, if he was even there, she wouldn't make it. Not like this. Not bleeding out in his arms while he... They came. Mara's eyes cracked open, unfocused. Said they wanted... Who? Cole's voice came out harder than he meant. Who did this? Man with scar, whole side of his face. Each word cost her. Said to tell you, Vance remembers. The name hit Cole like a fist to the chest. Vance. Rourke Vance. A name he hadn't heard in 6 years, a ghost from a life he'd buried along with his guns. Said you'd know, Mara whispered, blood on her lips now. Said he's been looking... long time. Cole's jaw locked so hard his teeth ached. His hands pressed firmer against her wounds, trying to hold her together through sheer will. How many? 6. Maybe 7. They... She choked, coughed. More blood. They wanted you to come. That's what he said. Tell Cole I'll be waiting. A trap. This whole thing was a trap, and Mara was the bait. Rage flooded through Cole, hot and familiar. A thing he'd spent 6 years learning to drown. He'd walked away from that life, hung up his guns, let his reputation fade into myth, built something clean here, something good. A ranch. A wife. A future that didn't reek of gunpowder and regret. And Vance had burned it all down to drag him back. Stay with me. Cole shifted, getting his arms under Mara, lifting as gently as he could. She was small, always had been, but now she felt like nothing, like she might slip away if he wasn't careful. You hear me? Stay with me. Her eyes had closed again, breathing too shallow, too fast. The ride to town was hell. Cole pushed his horse harder than he should have, one arm locked around Mara, the other working the reins. Every jolt, every uneven stride made her gasp or whimper. He whispered to her the whole way, promises, prayers to a God he'd stopped believing in, threats to death itself if it tried to take her before he got her to Morrison. The town of Redemption was asleep when he thundered down Main Street, hooves echoing off the false front buildings. He didn't care. Pulled up hard in front of Doc Morrison's office and kicked the door until it splintered. Morrison stumbled out in his nightshirt, bleary-eyed, smelling like whiskey, but not drunk. Not yet. He took one look at Mara and went still. "Get her inside," Morrison said, voice clipped, professional. "Now." The next 3 hours were the longest of Cole's life. He sat in Morrison's front room while the doctor worked behind a closed door. Sat with Mara's blood drying on his hands, his shirt ground into the creases of his palms. Sat while the town woke up around him, while early risers passed by the window and pretended not to stare. Word would spread fast. Cole Hale's ranch burned, his wife half dead. Everyone would have questions. Cole had only one question, and its answer was 6 years old. Rourke Vance. They'd ridden together once, back when Cole was younger and stupider, when violence was just another tool and consequences were someone else's problem. Vance had been vicious even then, the kind of man who'd burn a homestead for pocket change and laugh while doing it. Cole had finally walked away after Vance killed a family, father, mother, 2 kids, over a stolen horse, just shot them down in their yard and rode off whistling. That night, Cole had made a choice. He'd taken his share of their last score, disappeared into the territories, and rebuilt himself into someone who didn't do that kind of thing anymore. Someone clean. But Vance remembered. And Vance had a long memory. The door opened. Morrison stepped out, wiping his hands on a rag already soaked through with red. His face was carved from exhaustion and something else. Doubt, maybe. Or pity. "She's alive," Morrison said. Cole exhaled for what felt like the first time in hours. "But she shouldn't be." Morrison tossed the rag aside, fixed Cole with a hard look. 3 broken ribs, 1 punctured lung, burns over 20% of her body, and that head wound. She's got a skull fracture, Cole. I've done what I can, but what? But I'm a frontier doctor with whiskey for anesthetic and prayers for backup. She needs more than I can give her. There's a hospital in Cheyenne, real surgeons, equipment I don't have. If you can get her there, how long? Morrison hesitated. A week, maybe 2 if she's lucky and infection doesn't set in. But Cole, moving her right now could... I'll handle it. Cole stood, every muscle protesting. He felt like he'd aged a decade since sunset. I need to see her. 5 minutes. She's unconscious, probably will be for a while. Cole pushed past him into the back room. Mara looked impossibly small on Morrison's surgical table, her skin pale against the white bandages wrapped around her head, her chest, her arms. Breathing, but barely. Each rise and fall of her chest seemed like it might be the last. Cole stood there, memorizing her face, the curve of her cheek, the small scar above her eyebrow from when she'd fallen off her horse at 15. The way her hair fell even now, even like this. He'd spent 6 years trying to deserve her, 6 years proving he could be more than the gun he used to be. And in one night, Vance had ripped it all away. Cole's hand drifted to his hip, to the empty space where his gun belt used to ride. He'd buried it after they married, wrapped the whole rig in oilcloth and put it 6 feet down behind the barn. Symbolic, Mara had said. A new start. The barn was ash now. But the guns were still there, waiting in the earth like seeds. I'll fix this, Cole whispered to his unconscious wife. I swear to you, I'll fix this. He turned and walked out before Morrison could stop him. Plus, the ride back to the ranch took him through country he knew, like the lines on his own palms. Rolling plains, scattered pine, the distant teeth of mountains gnawing at the horizon. He'd fallen in love with this land the first time he saw it, years ago. Wild, open, indifferent to the violence of men. A place where a person could disappear, start over, become someone new. He'd been so sure he'd done that, so sure. Dawn was breaking when he reached the ruins. In daylight, it looked worse somehow. The destruction was complete, methodical. They'd wanted to erase him. Not just kill his wife, but destroy everything he'd built, salt the earth of his new life. Cole dismounted and walked through the wreckage, taking inventory. The chickens were gone, probably scattered or eaten by coyotes. The horses, too, driven off or stolen. Everything of value had been looted. What couldn't be carried had been smashed, burned, ruined. He found the spot behind where the barn used to stand and started digging. The ground was soft from snowmelt, easy to work. 6 feet down, his shovel hit oilcloth. Cole hauled the bundle up and unwrapped it slowly, like a man opening a coffin. His gun belt. 2 Colt 45s, custom grips worn smooth by his hands and nobody else's, cleaning kit, box of ammunition, a knife with a bone handle, and a history Cole tried not to think about. He strapped the belt on, settled the guns on his hips. The weight was familiar, comfortable in a way that made his stomach turn, like putting on an old coat and finding it still fit perfectly. 6 years. 6 years of being someone else, and it took exactly one night for that person to disappear. Cole checked the guns methodically. Action smooth, cylinders clean despite the burial. He'd maintained them before putting them away, some paranoid part of him knowing, maybe always knowing, that peace was temporary, that men like him didn't get to walk away forever. He loaded both guns, 5 rounds each, hammer on an empty chamber. Safe carry, his old partner used to say. Cole pushed the thought away. Footsteps behind him. Cole's hand went to his gun before he could stop himself, turning, drawing halfway before his brain caught up to his reflexes. Sheriff Tom Wickens stood 10 feet away, hands visible, expression carefully neutral. He was older than Cole by a decade, gray-bearded, with eyes that had seen enough to know when to push and when to wait. Heard what happened, Wickens said quietly. Came to see if you needed help. Cole let his hand fall away from the Colt. Bit late for that. I know. Wickens stepped closer, careful-like, the way you approached a wounded animal. How's Mara? Alive. Barely. Doc Morrison's good. She'll pull through. Maybe. They stood there in the ruins, 2 men with history neither of them wanted to discuss. Wickens had been sheriff for 12 years, long enough to hear the stories about Cole Hale, long enough to decide that what a man did before settling in redemption wasn't his business, as long as they kept their nose clean after. Cole had kept his nose clean. Until now. You know who did this? Wickens asked. I know. You plan on doing something about it? Cole looked at him, really looked at him. You asking as the law or as a man? Wickens was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful. Law says you report what you know, let me handle it. Law says vigilante justice just makes more bodies, more widows, more orphans. And as a man? Wickens met his eyes. As a man, I got a wife too. If someone did to her what they did to Mara, he trailed off, shook his head. But Cole, you go down this road, you might not come back. I've heard the stories about you, about what you used to be. Stories are just stories. Are they? Cole didn't answer. He turned back to the ruins, to the blackened timber and ash. Somewhere in there was the life he'd built, the furniture he'd made, the dishes Mara had brought from her mother's house, the small things that made a place a home, all gone now, reduced to memory and char. They left a message, Cole said. The man who led them, Rourke Vance, told Mara to tell me he remembers, that he'll be waiting. Wickens went still. Vance. The Vance from the territorial days, the one they say rode with? He stopped, looked at Cole differently. Hell. He wants me to come after him. That's what this was. Not robbery, not random violence, bait. Then don't take it. Stay here. Stay with Mara. I'll put together a posse. A posse won't survive Vance. You know it. I know it. He's got 6, maybe 7 men, all hard, all killers. They'll be in rough country by now, somewhere they can see anyone coming from miles off. Cole checked his guns again, more habit than necessity. This is personal, between him and me. You'll die. Maybe. And if you do, Mara wakes up to nothing. No husband, no home, no futures. The words hit hard because they were true. Cole's jaw worked. For a long moment, he stood there on the edge of 2 paths, 2 versions of himself. The man who'd walked away from violence and built something good. The man who'd strap on his guns and ride into hell for revenge. Except it wasn't revenge, was it? It was protection. As long as Vance was out there, Mara wasn't safe. The ranch, if it could be rebuilt, wasn't safe. Nothing was safe. I don't have a choice, Cole said quietly. There's always a choice. No, there really isn't. Cole turned to face Wickens fully. Vance won't stop. This wasn't about the ranch or Mara or anything he could steal. This was about me, about dragging me back into the life I left. And if I don't go, if I try to hide behind your badge, and a posse of farmers with squirrel rifles. He'll come back, and next time Mara won't survive. Wickens looked at him for a long time. Finally, he nodded, just a small dip of his chin. How long you need? Day and a half to pick up the trail, maybe 3 more to run them down, depending on where they hold up. I'll look after Mara. Make sure Morrison has what he needs. Send word to Cheyenne if she takes a turn. Appreciate it. Cole? Wickens caught his arm as he turned to leave. The man you used to be, the one in the stories, he did some dark things. Things that don't wash off easy. I know. You become him again, even for a good reason, you might not find your way back. Cole looked down at the guns on his hips, the weight of them already familiar again, like they'd never left. I know that too. He left an hour later, heading northwest based on the tracks he'd found at the ranch. 7 horses, one lighter than the others, probably carrying supplies. They'd left at a gallop, not worried about being followed, confident in their head start. They didn't know Cole. Not anymore. Didn't know what 6 years of peace had cost him, what it meant to have something worth protecting. The old Cole, the one who rode with Vance, had been dangerous because he had nothing to lose. This Cole was dangerous because he had everything to lose. The tracks led him into rougher country, away from the settlements and stage roads. Pine forest gave way to scrub, then to badlands, all red rock and hidden gullies. Hard land, the kind that killed careless men and hid bodies forever. By nightfall, Cole was 20 miles from Redemption, camped in a shallow draw with no fire. He chewed jerky and stale bread, drank from his canteen, tried not to think about Mara alone in Morrison's back room. Sleep didn't come easy. When it did, he dreamed of fire and blood, of Mara's voice calling his name, of Vance's laugh echoing across empty plains. He woke before dawn, saddled up, kept moving. The tracks stayed clear for another day, heading steadily into canyon country. Cole knew where they were going before he saw it. Devil's Spine, a maze of narrow canyons and dead-end ravines that stretched for miles. Outlaw country. The kind of place lawmen didn't go unless they had a death wish. Perfect for an ambush. Cole found their camp just before sunset on the 3rd day. Smoke rising from a canyon about 2 miles ahead, visible only because the light was right, and he knew what to look for. He left his horse tied in a stand of scrub pine and went forward on foot, rifle in hand, moving quiet. The canyon was narrow, walls rising steep on both sides. Bad place for a fight, too easy to get boxed in. But the smoke meant they'd stopped, felt safe enough to light a fire. Confident. That was good. Confident men made mistakes. Cole worked his way along the rim, staying low, until he could see down into their camp. 6 men. Vance wasn't there, which meant he was either scouting or waiting somewhere else. The men below were relaxed, passing a bottle, laughing at something. Cole watched them, cataloging faces, looking for weaknesses. Movement to his left froze him. A 7th man, walking the rim, rifle slung over his shoulder. Sentry. Cole pressed himself flat against the rock, barely breathing. The man passed within 10 feet, whistling tunelessly, and kept going, sloppy. They thought they were safe out here, thought no one would follow. Or maybe they just didn't think Cole was worth worrying about. Old gunslinger, gone soft, probably dead in the ruins of his ranch. They'd learn. Cole waited until the sentry was out of sight, then backed away from the rim. He'd seen enough. 6 men in the canyon, probably 1 more on patrol. Vance somewhere else, maybe in a different canyon, maybe watching from high ground. Standard Vance tactic. Let your men do the dying while you wait for your target to show himself. Then strike when they're weak, wounded, out of ammunition. Cole had seen him do it before. Wouldn't fall for it now. He made his way back to his horse, mind working through options. Direct assault was suicide. Even if he dropped 2 or 3 in the opening seconds, the others would scatter, find cover, pin him down. The canyon walls would trap him as much as them. He needed an edge. Needed to split them up, take them piecemeal, turn their confidence into fear. Needed to become the ghost they thought was already dead. The attack came at dawn. Cole waited until first light, when the men below would be half awake, stiff from sleeping on hard ground, vision still adjusting. He'd spent the night preparing, positioning himself on the canyon rim directly above their camp. First shot dropped the sentry. Clean, through the chest, the man dead before he hit the ground. The crack of the rifle echoed off canyon walls, multiplying, making it hard to tell where it came from. The men below scrambled, grabbing for weapons, diving for cover. Cole was already moving, running along the rim to a new position. Second shot punched through a man trying to climb the canyon wall. Third shot missed as his target threw himself behind a boulder. "Up top!" someone screamed. "He's on the rim!" Bullets chewed into the rock where Cole had been. Too late. Poorly aimed panic fire. He dropped flat, crawled 20 yards, popped up in a new spot. Two men were trying to work their way up a narrow trail. Cole shot the first one, watched him tumble backward into the second, both of them going down in a tangle. 4 left. Maybe 5 if Vance was close. Cole reloaded, hand steady, mind calm. This was the part of him he'd buried, the part that didn't hesitate or question, the part that moved like water, thought like smoke, killed like breathing. He hated it. God, he hated it. But he was good at it. A bullet cracked past his head, close enough to feel the wind. Someone had gotten a bead on him. Cole rolled, came up behind a different rock, scanned for the shooter. There. Muzzle flash from a crevice 30 yards down the canyon. Smart position, good cover. Cole lined up the shot, waited for the man to fire again, tracked the flash. Squeezed the trigger. The man slumped forward, rifle clattering down. 3 left. And they were running. Cole watched them scramble for their horses, trying to flee. He could have shot them in the back. Easy kills. But something in him balked at that. Some last shred of the man he'd been trying to be. He let them run. For now. But movement below caught his eye. Not the fleeing men. Something else. Someone tied to a rock near the burnt-out fire. Small. A kid, maybe 12, 13, rope around his wrists, terror on his face. Hostage. They'd grabbed a kid somewhere, probably planning to use him as leverage if things went bad. Cole cursed under his breath. He couldn't leave the boy. But going down into the canyon meant exposing himself, losing the high ground. If Vance was watching, waiting for exactly this, the decision made itself. Cole slung his rifle, started down the narrow trail the dead men had tried to climb. Rocks loose underfoot, treacherous. He moved fast anyway, ears straining for sounds of an ambush. He reached the canyon floor, gun drawn, sweeping for threats. Nothing. The camp was silent except for the whimpering of the kid tied up. Cole approached carefully. "You hurt?" The boy shook his head, eyes wide. You killed them." "Yeah." "Are you going to kill me?" "No." Cole cut the ropes, stepped back. "Where are you from?" "Homestead about 40 miles south. They came 3 days ago. Killed my pa. Took me." The boy's voice broke. "Said they needed someone to fetch water, do chores. Said if I ran, they'd hunt down my ma and sister." Cole's jaw locked. Vance's men. Of course they'd killed and terrorized some innocent family. That's what they did. That's what they'd always done. "Your ma and sister still alive?" "Think so. They left them there." "Then get back to them. Follow the canyon east till it opens up, then head south. You see anyone, you hide. Understand?" The boy nodded, already backing away. "Who are you?" Cole didn't answer, just turned and started checking the bodies, looking for anything useful. Ammunition, food, information. He found a map on one of the dead men, hand-drawn, marking several canyons. One was circled in red, Devil's Spine, deeper in. Coordinates, maybe. Or a meeting point, Vance's location. Cole pocketed the map, reloaded his weapons. The 3 who'd run would tell Vance what happened. Tell him that Cole had come, that he'd killed 4 men without breaking a sweat, that the trap had failed. Good. Let them tell him. Let Vance know exactly what was hunting him now. Cole climbed back out of the canyon as the sun rose higher, turning the Badlands into an oven. He had the high ground again, the map, and the knowledge that Vance's force was cut in half. But Vance was still out there, waiting, planning, and men like Vance didn't go down easy. This was far from over. But, the next 2 days were a game of cat and mouse played across brutal country. Cole followed the map deeper into Devil's Spine, tracking not just boot prints but broken branches, disturbed rocks, the small signs that men trying to hide still couldn't help but leave. Vance's remaining men were scared now, moving erratically, making mistakes. Cole found their second camp abandoned, fire still warm. They'd left in a hurry, probably heard him coming. He studied the tracks, read the story. 3 men on horses, riding hard northwest, away from the circled location on the map, running, or leading him into another trap. Cole chose his path carefully, staying off the obvious trails, using draws and gullies for cover. The land here was hostile, waterless, full of rattlesnakes and scorpions. Heat that could kill a man if he wasn't prepared. But Cole had ridden worse country. And he had something Vance's men didn't: focus. They were running scared, desperate. He was hunting, patient, methodical. On the afternoon of the 5th day, he found them. The canyon opened into a wider bowl, walls steep, only 2 ways in or out. Natural fortress. And there, at the far end, sheltered under an overhang, Vance's final camp. Cole studied it from a distance, counting men. 2 visible, both armed, both watching the approaches. The 3rd might be inside the overhang, or dead, or run off. Hard to say. And Vance himself? Cole scanned the high ground, looking for the telltale glint of a rifle scope, the shadow that didn't quite fit. Nothing. Either Vance was well hidden, or he wasn't here. The thought made Cole's skin crawl. Vance was always here, always watching. That was his way. Control the board. Let others make the moves. Strike when they thought they were winning. So where was he? Cole worked his way around the bowl's rim, staying low, watching not just the camp, but the rocks above it, the hidden crevices, anywhere a man could hide and wait. There, movement, barely visible, on an outcrop 50 yards above the camp, a figure in shadow, rifle resting across his knees, watching the approaches, waiting. Vance. Even at this distance, Cole recognized him. The way he sat, patient and still. The scar that split the left side of his face, ear to jaw, a souvenir from a knife fight years ago. The cold calculation in every movement. Cole's hands tightened on his rifle. 1 shot. He could end it right now. Drop Vance from ambush, then deal with the others. Clean, quick. But something stopped him. Some stubborn part of him that needed Vance to see it coming, to know who killed him and why. Needed it to be face to face, not murder from hiding. Stupid. Sentimental. The kind of thinking that got men killed. But Cole had already crossed so many lines coming here. Might as well hold on to one last shred of something that felt like honor. He circled around, using the bowl's broken terrain for cover, working his way toward Vance's position from behind. Slow, careful. Every step measured, every sound considered. It took him an hour to cover 200 yards. When he was 20 feet away, rifle aimed at Vance's back, he spoke. "Hello, Rourke." Vance didn't flinch, didn't turn, just sat there, still as stone for a long moment. Then slowly he set his rifle aside and raised his hands. Cole. Vance's voice was exactly as Cole remembered. Gravel and rust, like something dug out of the earth. "Took you long enough. Your men are dead." "I know. Heard the shooting, saw the 3 that ran." Vance turned around now, hands still raised, that ruined face splitting into a smile. "You always were efficient." Cole kept the rifle steady, finger on the trigger. "You burned my ranch, tried to kill my wife." "Tried?" Vance's smile widened. "Damn. She tougher than she looked? She's alive, you're not going to be." "Well, that's the plan, ain't it? You coming all this way, tracking me down like old times. Except it's not like old times, is it, Cole? You got soft. Got yourself a wife, a ranch, a whole new life." Vance spat. "Pathetic," says the man who had to burn down a homestead to get my attention. "Worked though, didn't it?" Vance's hands lowered slightly. Cole tensed, but Vance didn't go for a weapon. Just clasped them in front of him, casual. "You want to know why? Why I came for you?" "Don't care." "Liar, you care. You always cared. That was your problem. Too much thinking, too much conscience." Vance leaned forward. "I came for you because you left me, Cole. Rode out one night without a word, like I was nothing. Like what we built together was nothing. What we built was a trail of bodies in burned towns. We built a reputation. We were feared, respected. Men stepped aside when we walked past. And you threw it away for what? A woman and some dirt in Wyoming?" Cole's jaw ached from clenching. "I threw it away because I didn't want to be you. Didn't want to end up like this, hiding in canyons, running from the law, living like an animal. And how's that working out?" Vance gestured around them. You're right back where you started, Cole. Gun in your hand, blood on your trail. The only difference is now you got something to lose, and I took it from you. You took nothing. Mara's alive. The ranch can be rebuilt. Can it? Vance's eyes glittered. You really think you can go back after this? After what you did to my men? After what you're about to do to me? He laughed, harsh and bitter. No, Cole. You're one of us again. Always was, always will be. The guns don't let go that easy. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the wind whistling through the canyon. Below, Vance's remaining men hadn't noticed anything yet. Too far away, too focused on watching the wrong approaches. Cole knew Vance was right about one thing. This wouldn't end clean. Wouldn't end with Cole riding home, hanging up his guns again, going back to the man he'd been trying to be. That man was gone, buried in the ashes of his ranch. But Vance was wrong about the rest. Wrong about what Cole had become. Wrong about what he was doing this for. This isn't about me, Cole said quietly. Never was. It's about making sure you never hurt anyone I love again. He pulled the trigger. The shot echoed across the canyon, final and absolute. Vance jerked backward, surprise flashing across his face, genuine surprise that Cole had actually done it, before the light went out of his eyes. Below, the two men shouted, scrambling for weapons. Cole was already moving, descending the rocky slope, rifle reloading on instinct. They saw him coming, raised their guns. He was faster. 2 more shots, 2 more bodies. The canyon fell silent again, just wind and settling dust. Cole stood there, surrounded by the dead, breathing hard. Not from exertion, from the weight of what he'd done, what he'd had to become to do it. He thought about Wickens's warning, "You might not come back." He thought about Mara, unconscious in Morrison's back room, fighting for her life while he fought for her future. He thought about the man he'd been this morning and the man he was now, and wondered if there was any difference left. The sun was setting, painting the canyon walls in shades of blood and fire. Cole gathered what supplies he could from Vance's camp: water, ammunition, food for the ride home. He left the bodies where they fell. Let the crows and coyotes have them. Let the desert take them back. He'd done what he came to do. Ended the threat. Made sure Vance would never hurt anyone again. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like something breaking inside him that wouldn't ever quite heal right. But Mara was alive. That was what mattered. That was everything. Cole mounted his horse and turned south, toward redemption, toward home. Behind him, Devil's Spine Canyon held its dead, one more story of violence swallowed by the indifferent land. Ahead, somewhere in the darkness, was a wife who needed him, a ranch that needed rebuilding, and a future that would never quite be what he'd hoped for. But it would be theirs. Whatever came next, whatever he'd had to become to protect it, it would be theirs. And for now, riding through the twilight with the smell of gun smoke still in his clothes, that would have to be enough. The ride back took 4 days instead of 3. Cole's horse was spent, and truthfully, so was he. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixed, something deeper, settled into his bones like winter cold. He stopped only when he had to, ate without tasting, slept in short stretches that left him more hollowed out than rested. On the second night, camped in a stand of cottonwoods near a dry creek bed, he tried to clean Vance's blood off his hands. Scrubbed until his skin was raw, but the stain seemed to go deeper than soap and creek water could reach. Finally, he gave up, sat there staring at his palms in the firelight like they belonged to someone else. They did, in a way. These were the hands that had pulled those triggers, ended those lives. The same hands that had built fence posts and carried Mara over the threshold of their new house. Same flesh, different man. Or maybe the same man wearing different faces, and the real horror was how easily he could switch between them. He thought about what Vance had said. "You're one of us again. The guns don't let go that easy." Cole had put a bullet in him for it, but that didn't make it less true. When redemption finally appeared on the horizon, dusty Main Street, false front buildings, church steeple pointing at an empty sky, Cole felt nothing. No relief, no homecoming warmth, just the dull recognition that he'd made it back, that the thing he'd gone to do was done. He rode straight to Doc Morrison's office, left his horse tied out front without bothering to hitch it properly. The door was unlocked. Inside, the front room was empty, but he could hear voices from the back. Low, urgent. Morrison's gravelly tenor and someone else, higher pitched. Female. Cole's heart kicked. He pushed through the door without knocking. Morrison was bent over the examination table, changing bandages, and sitting up, pale as milk but conscious, alive, aware, was Mara. She turned at the sound of the door. Their eyes met. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Cole stood there in the doorway, covered in trail dust and other men's blood, looking at his wife like she was something he'd dreamed up, some trick his exhausted mind was playing. She stared back, taking in the guns on his hips, the hollowness in his face, the way he stood like he was ready to fight or run at any second. "Cole," she said. Her voice was rough, scraped raw, but it was hers, real. He crossed the room in 3 strides, dropped to his knees beside the table, took her hand in both of his. It was warm, alive, solid. "You're awake," he managed. 2 days now. She squeezed his fingers, weak but deliberate. "Tom said you went after them." Cole glanced at Morrison, who was making himself busy with the bandages, pretending not to listen. "Yeah, I went. And? They won't be coming back." Mara's eyes searched his face, reading things he couldn't hide. The weight, the cost, the parts of him that were different now. "All of them?" "All of them." She didn't ask how many, didn't ask for details. Just nodded, slow, like she'd expected this but hoped against it. "You're hurt?" "No." "Liar. You always hold your left side when your ribs are bruised." She touched his face, fingers tracing the new lines etched there by sleepless nights and hard choices. "You look like you've aged 10 years. Feel like 20. Morrison cleared his throat. "I'll give you two some privacy. Colt, you need anything? Water, food, whiskey? You know where I keep things." He gathered his supplies and left, closing the door soft behind him. The silence stretched. Mara's hand stayed on Cole's face, thumb brushing his cheekbone. He leaned into it, eyes closed, trying to memorize the feeling. This was why he'd done it. This moment, this woman, this impossible second chance at having her alive and breathing. "I thought I lost you," he said quietly. "You almost did. Doc says it was close. Closer than close." She pulled her hand back, settled it in her lap. "I don't remember much after they left. Just fire and pain and trying to crawl somewhere, anywhere. Then you were there, and then nothing until I woke up here. They wanted me to find you like that. Wanted me to come after them. I know. The one with the scar, he said as much. Said you'd understand, that this was personal." Mara's jaw tightened. "I tried to fight, grabbed one of their rifles, got a shot off before they took it from me, hit the barn instead of any of them, and then the whole thing went up. That's when—" She stopped, swallowed hard. "That's when they really started hurting me." Cole's hands clenched into fists before he could stop them. "Mara, No, you need to hear this. They didn't just burn the ranch and leave. They wanted me to suffer. Wanted to make sure when you found me, you'd see exactly what they were capable of." Her voice stayed level, controlled, but her eyes glistened. "The man with the scar, Vance. He stood there and watched while his men worked me over. Didn't lift a finger himself. Just watched and smiled." The image hit Cole like a physical blow. He'd killed Vance too quickly. Should have made it slow, made it hurt, made him feel a fraction of what Mara had felt. "He's dead now," Cole said. "They all are." Good. No hesitation, no moral wrestling, just cold, flat certainty. Did they suffer? The question surprised him. Mara had always been gentle, compassionate, the kind of woman who'd nurse injured birds and cry over dead kittens. But there was nothing gentle in her eyes right now, just a hard, sharp edge that hadn't been there before. "Some of them," Cole said honestly. "Not enough. I'm glad you went. Glad you killed them." She took his hand again, squeezed harder this time. "But Cole, you can't keep those guns. When this is done, when we're back on our feet, you have to bury them again. You have to promise me. Morris, promise me. Because the man who came through that door isn't the man who left. I can see it in your eyes, in the way you move. You've gone somewhere dark, and if you stay there, if you let those guns keep hold of you, we won't make it. I know we won't." Cole wanted to argue, wanted to say he could handle it, that he could be both men, the protector and the builder. But he'd seen too many others try that dance and fail, Seen good men slide back into violence because once you open that door, it never quite closed again. I promise, he said, and hoped it wasn't a lie. She studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Okay. A pause. Tom told me about the boy, the one you saved. What about him? He made it home. His mother came through town yesterday looking for you, wanted to thank you, but you were still gone. Tom said she cried when he told her what happened to her husband. Cole's throat tightened. Another widow. Another family destroyed by Vance's men. He'd avenged it, sure, but vengeance didn't bring back the dead, didn't fill the empty chair at their dinner table. How old was he? Mara asked. The boy. 12, maybe 13, scared out of his mind. You could have left him, finished the fight without the risk. No, I couldn't. She smiled, sad and small. That's how I know you're still in there, the real you, under all that darkness. You saved him because that's who you are. Cole wasn't so sure, but he didn't argue. Let her believe it. Maybe if she believed hard enough, it would become true. Morrison came back in after a while, carrying a tray with soup and bread. She needs to eat, he said to Cole, and you look like you could use some yourself. I'm fine. You're half dead on your feet and you smell like you've been sleeping in a stable. There's a washroom in back and I've got clean clothes that'll mostly fit. Go make yourself human again. Morrison set the tray down, fixed Cole with a look that didn't leave room for argument. I'll keep an eye on her. Cole didn't want to leave, but Morrison was right. He was rank, exhausted, holding himself together through pure stubbornness. And Mara didn't need to see him like this, didn't need the constant reminder of what he'd been doing the past week. He stood, legs protesting. I'll be back in a bit. I'm not going anywhere, Mara said. The washroom was small, just a basin and a mirror, and a bar of lye soap that could strip paint. Cole peeled off his clothes, saw the bruises blooming across his ribs, the cuts and scrapes from scrambling over rocks. Nothing serious, nothing that wouldn't heal. He washed methodically, scrubbing away layers of dust and sweat and dried blood. Some of it was his. Most wasn't. The water in the basin turned rust brown, then black. He emptied it twice before he felt anything close to clean. The mirror showed him a stranger, leaner, harder, with eyes that had seen things they couldn't unsee. The face was his, but the expression belonged to someone else, someone who'd put 7 men in the ground without losing sleep. Cole looked away. Morrison's clothes fit poorly, too short in the arms, too wide in the waist, but they were clean and didn't carry the smell of gun smoke and death. Cole dressed, left his own clothes in a pile for burning, and went back out. Mara had managed a few spoonfuls of soup, but looked exhausted from the effort. Morrison was hovering, professional concern etched into every line of his face. She needs rest, Morrison said. Real rest, not just a few hours here and there, and she needs to stay still, let those ribs knit properly. How long before she can travel? Cole asked. Travel? Cole, she can barely sit up without help. Moving her right now would... How long? Morrison's jaw worked. 2 weeks. Minimum. And that's if everything goes perfectly, which it won't. A month would be better. 2 would be smart. Cole did the math. 2 months in redemption, staying at Morrison's or imposing on someone's hospitality, while Mara slowly healed and the ranch sat in ruins. 2 months of people looking at him differently, knowing what he'd done, knowing what he was capable of. 2 months of those guns sitting on his hip, getting more comfortable every day. We'll stay as long as we need to, Cole said. But then we're going back, rebuilding. With what? Morrison spread his hands. Your house is ash. Your barn's gone. Your livestock scattered or dead. You think you can just start over like nothing happened? People have started over with less. Not people who just fought a small war in Devil's Spine Canyon. Morrison lowered his voice. Cole, I've kept my mouth shut about your past because it wasn't my business. But now it is. You've stirred up a hornet's nest. Vance had friends, associates, people who will hear about this and come looking for answers. Let them come. You hear yourself? You sound like... Morrison caught himself, glanced at Mara, who was watching them both with worried eyes. Like someone who wants to keep fighting. I want to keep my wife safe. If that means fighting, then that's what it means. Mara spoke up, voice weak but firm. Both of you stop. Cole, Doc Morrison's right. You can't fight everyone who might come looking. And Doc, Cole's right too. We can't stay here forever, living on charity and goodwill. So what do you suggest? Morrison asked. We stay until I can travel. Then we go back, see what can be salvaged, make a plan. She looked at Cole. A real plan, not just stubbornness and gunpowder. Cole wanted to argue, but what would be the point? She was right. They both were. He was thinking like a man with a hammer, seeing every problem as a nail to be driven or an enemy to be shot. Okay, he said. Okay, we'll do it smart. Morrison looked skeptical but didn't push. I'll leave you two alone. Cole, there's a spare room upstairs if you want to sleep somewhere that isn't the floor. After he left, Mara reached for Cole's hand again. Come here. Sit. He pulled up a chair, sat close enough that their knees touched. Her fingers intertwined with his, grip weak but persistent. Tell me the truth, she said. How bad was it out there? Cole considered lying, softening it, giving her the version where he'd been forced into it, where every death had been unavoidable. But Mara deserved better than that, deserved the truth, ugly as it was. Bad, he said. I killed 7 men in 5 days. Some of them were quick, clean, others weren't. And the worst part is, he stopped, struggling with the words. The worst part is how easy it was. Like I'd never stopped. Like those 6 years were just a break between one fight and the next. You had to do it. Did I? Or did I want to? He met her eyes. When I pulled that trigger on Vance, part of me was doing it for you, to keep you safe. But part of me was doing it because I wanted him dead. Because it felt right, putting him down like a rabid dog. He was a rabid dog. Maybe. But I enjoyed it, Mara. That's what scares me. I stood over his body and felt satisfied. Felt like I'd accomplished something worthwhile. Cole's voice cracked. What does that make me? Mara was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her words were careful, measured. It makes you human. Flawed and complicated and human. You're not a monster, Cole. Monsters don't question themselves. Monsters don't sit here worrying about what it means that they felt satisfaction. Vance said I was one of them. Said I always would be. Vance was wrong. You know how I know? Because you came back. You could have kept going, could have disappeared into the territories, gone back to that life permanently. But you came back. To me. To this. She gestured around the small room at the mundane reality of recovery and healing. That's not something a monster does. Cole wanted to believe her, needed to believe her, but doubt was a persistent thing, digging in with sharp claws. When I was out there, he said slowly, tracking them, hunting them, I felt alive in a way I haven't in years. Everything was clear, simple. No questions about what I should be doing or who I should be. Just the target, the plan, the execution. He paused. I'm afraid of how much I miss that clarity. Then we'll find you new clarity. Build something so demanding, so all-consuming, that you don't have time to miss the old life. Mara's grip tightened. We'll rebuild the ranch bigger than before. More land, more stock, something that takes every ounce of energy you've got. Make you so tired at the end of each day that you fall asleep before your head hits the pillow. And if that doesn't work, then we'll try something else. And something else after that, however long it takes. She pulled him closer, until their foreheads touched. I'm not giving up on you, Cole Hale. I didn't survive what they did to me just to lose you to your own doubts. He closed his eyes, breathing her in. She smelled like soap and medicine, and underneath it all, like herself. Like home. I love you, he said. I know, I love you too, even when you're being stupid and self-destructive. That got a small laugh out of him, rough and surprised. Stupid and self-destructive. That's me. That's us. We're both a mess, in case you hadn't noticed. She pulled back, looked at him with those clear, honest eyes. But we're a mess together, and that's better than being perfect alone. They sat like that for a while, just holding hands, breathing in sync. Outside, the afternoon was fading into evening. Somewhere in town, people were going about their ordinary lives, cooking dinner, tending shops, arguing about nothing important. The normal world, spinning on while Cole and Mara tried to find their place in it again. Eventually, Morrison came back with more food and a stern lecture about Mara needing sleep. Cole retreated to the spare room upstairs, a narrow space with a bed that sagged in the middle and a window that looked out over Main Street. He should have slept, should have collapsed into unconsciousness and stayed there for a day straight. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw Vance's face in that last second, the surprise giving way to nothing, saw the bodies in the canyon, saw Mara burning, crawling through the dirt. Around midnight, he gave up, went downstairs. Mara was asleep, breathing steady, color better than it had been earlier. Morrison was dozing in a chair nearby, medical bag at his feet, ready to jump into action if needed. Cole stood in the doorway, watching them both. The doctor who'd saved his wife's life. The wife who was saving his. Two people fighting to keep him tethered to something good, something worth protecting. He touched the guns on his hip. He'd put them back on after washing, couldn't help himself, and felt their weight like a curse. Mara was right. These had to go. Had to be buried deeper this time, somewhere he couldn't dig them up on impulse. But not yet. Not until he was sure the danger was really over, that no one else from Vance's world would come looking for revenge or answers. Not until Mara was strong enough to defend herself if something went wrong. Just a little longer. Then he'd put them away for good. That's what he told himself anyway. The next few days settled into a routine. Mornings, Cole would check on Mara, help her with the things Morrison couldn't or shouldn't, getting dressed, washing, moving around the room to keep her muscles from atrophy. She was getting stronger, could sit up without help now, could walk a few steps before exhaustion set in. Afternoons, Cole would make himself useful around town, fixing Mrs. Chen's fence that had come loose in the spring winds, helping Old Man Patterson move some heavy equipment in his smithy. Small jobs, simple work, the kind of thing that kept his hands busy and his mind from wandering to dark places. People were careful around him, polite, grateful for the help, but there was a distance that hadn't been there before. They knew what he'd done. Wickens had kept the details quiet, but news traveled fast in a small town, and the gaps filled themselves in with speculation and rumor. Cole Hale, the quiet rancher, had ridden out and killed 7 men, maybe more. Depending on who you asked, he was a hero defending his wife, a vigilante taking the law into his own hands, or something darker, a wolf in sheep's clothing, finally showing his true nature. The truth, as usual, was messier than any of those stories. On the 4th day, Wickens found him at Patterson's smithy, showing the old man's apprentice how to properly temper a blade. "Got a minute?" Wickens asked. Cole handed the blade back to the apprentice. "Keep the heat steady. Don't rush it." They walked out into the street, stood in the shade of the smithy's awning. Wickens pulled out a pipe, took his time packing and lighting it. Cole waited. He'd learned long ago that Wickens talked when he was ready, not before. "Had a visitor yesterday," Wickens finally said. "Federal marshal out of Cheyenne, asking about the situation in Devil's Spine Canyon." Cole's stomach tightened. And I told him what I knew, that a group of outlaws attacked your ranch, tried to kill your wife, and you tracked them down. Wickens puffed his pipe. Told him they were wanted men, most of them, that you did what any man would do. He buy that? He asked questions, how many men, how they died, whether you gave them a chance to surrender. Wickens looked at Cole. I told him I wasn't there, couldn't say for sure, but that in my experience, men like that don't surrender easy. What did he say to that? Said he'd be keeping an eye on the situation, that self-defense is one thing, but execution is another, and the line between them gets thin when 7 men end up dead. Wickens let that hang in the air. He's not wrong, Cole. They would have killed me if I'd given them the chance. I believe you, but a belief isn't evidence, and evidence is what the law runs on. Wickens knocked ash from his pipe. He's not going to push it, least not right now. Vance and his men had enough warrants between them to paper a wall. You did the territory a favor, even if the method was questionable. But you're on notice. Any more bodies, any more violence, and he'll come down hard. Federal hard, not local hard. Wickens met his eyes. You understand what I'm saying? Stay clean. Stay very clean. Keep those guns holstered. Hell, lose the guns entirely. Go back to being a rancher, boring and predictable. Wickens softened slightly. You got a second chance here, Cole. Don't throw it away. Cole nodded slowly. I hear you. Do you? Because I've seen men in your position before. They taste blood. Remember how it feels to be feared and respected, and they can't let it go. Can't go back to being ordinary. Wickens put a hand on Cole's shoulder. You're better than that. I know you are. Prove me right. After Wickens left, Cole stood there in the street, watching the town move around him. Wagons rolling past, kids playing in the dirt, shopkeepers opening their doors for the afternoon. Normal life, the kind he'd been trying to build before everything went to hell. It felt fake somehow, like a stage set, and he was an actor who'd forgotten his lines. He went back to Morrison's, found Mara awake and restless. "I need to get out of this room," she said. "Even just for a few minutes. I'm going crazy staring at these walls." Morrison was against it, but Mara was insistent, and Cole sided with her. They compromised, a brief walk outside, staying close to the building, with Cole supporting her the whole way. The afternoon sun hit them like a physical thing after days in Morrison's dim rooms. Mara squinted, raised a hand to shade her eyes, breathed deep. "I'd forgotten what fresh air smells like," she said. They walked slowly down the boardwalk, Mara leaning heavy on Cole's arm. People nodded as they passed, offered quiet greetings. Some looked sympathetic. Others looked curious, probably cataloging Mara's injuries, the way she moved, storing up details for later gossip. Mara ignored them all, focused on putting one foot in front of the other. By the time they reached the end of the block, she was breathing hard, face pale. "Okay," she admitted. "Maybe Doc Morrison was right." They turned back, even slower than before. Halfway there, Mara stopped, looking down the cross street toward where their ranch would be, miles out of town, invisible from here but present in both their minds. "What do you think is left?" she asked. "Not much. Foundation, maybe? Some of the tools if they didn't burn or get looted. We had 3 years of work in that place. 3 years of building something, piece by piece." Her voice was steady, but Cole could hear the grief underneath. "And they destroyed it in one night. We'll build it again, better this time." "Will we?" She looked at him. "Or will we spend the rest of our lives waiting for the next Vance, the next threat, the next fire in the night?" The question hit harder than she probably meant it to. Cole didn't have a good answer. Couldn't promise her safety, couldn't guarantee that his past was truly buried now. All he could offer was intention. "I don't know," he said honestly. "I want to tell you we're done. The killing Vance ended it, but I don't know." Mara nodded, like she'd expected that. "At least you're honest." They made it back to Morrison's and Mara collapsed onto the bed, completely spent. Morrison clucked his tongue, helped her get comfortable, checked her bandages. "No more walks for a while," he said firmly. "Not until you can make it down the block without looking like you're about to pass out." Mara didn't argue, just closed her eyes, already half asleep. Cole stayed until she was fully under, then went back outside. The town felt smaller suddenly, claustrophobic. He needed space, needed to move, needed something. He ended up at the edge of town, past the last buildings, standing at the top of a small rise that overlooked the plains. The land stretched out forever, empty and indifferent. Somewhere out there was Devil's Spine Canyon, already reclaiming the bodies he'd left behind. And beyond that, the territories, wild country where men could disappear and reinvent themselves. For a brief, shameful moment, Cole considered it. Just riding out, leaving redemption and Mara and all the complications behind. Starting over somewhere new, somewhere his past wouldn't follow. But that was Vance thinking, running from consequences, treating people like disposable things. Cole had spent 6 years proving he was better than that. He wasn't going to stop now. When he got back to Morrison's that evening, there was a stranger in the front room. Young guy, maybe 25, with a badge pinned to his vest and a nervous energy that screamed inexperience. "You Cole Hale?" the young man asked. "Depends on who's asking." The badge came forward, hand extended. "Deputy Marshal James Corrigan. I work out of the Cheyenne office. My superior, Marshal Wade, visited Sheriff Wickens yesterday." Cole shook his hand briefly. "I heard. I'm not here to cause trouble," Corrigan said quickly. "Just following up, making sure all the details are straight for the report." "Wickens already gave you a statement." "He did. But I'd like to hear your version. Get it on record, official-like." Corrigan pulled out a notebook, pencil already in hand. "Won't take long." Cole considered refusing, telling the deputy to take his questions and his notebook and ride back to Cheyenne. But that would only make things worse, raise suspicions where there shouldn't be any. So he told the story. The attack, finding Mara, tracking Vance's men into Devil's Spine. He kept it factual, stripped of emotion, the kind of recitation that sounded plausible without revealing too much. Corrigan scribbled notes, asked clarifying questions. How many men exactly? What weapons did they have? Did Cole give them a chance to surrender? No, Cole said to that last one. They shot first. I shot back. All 7 of them shot first? All 7 of them were armed and hostile. I didn't wait around to see who wanted to surrender and who wanted to kill me. Corrigan's pencil paused. That's, understandable, I suppose, but Mr. Hale, you have to see how this looks. One man, no matter how skilled, taking down 7 outlaws in hostile territory. It raises questions. What kind of questions? The kind that wonder if maybe some of those men were already wounded or unarmed or trying to flee when they died. Corrigan met Cole's eyes. The kind that wonder if this was justice or revenge. Cole's jaw tightened. Does it matter? They're dead either way. And the territory's safer for it. It matters to the law. It matters to making sure vigilantism doesn't become the standard. Corrigan closed his notebook. I'm going to be straight with you, Mr. Hale. Marshal Wade thinks you're a problem waiting to happen. He thinks you've got a violent past you're not being honest about, and that this incident is proof you haven't really changed. And what do you think? Corrigan hesitated. I think you did what you thought you had to do to protect your wife, but I also think you're dangerous. And dangerous men need watching. Cole stood. The conversation was over. You done with your questions? For now, but I'll be around, checking in, making sure things stay quiet. Corrigan headed for the door, then paused. For what it's worth, I'm sorry about your wife. What they did to her was wrong. Just be careful how you balance the scales. Sometimes the cost is higher than you think. After he left, Cole stood there in the empty room, fists clenched, fighting the urge to put his fist through the wall. He was being penalized for surviving, for protecting what was his, being treated like a criminal because he'd been good at stopping criminals. The injustice of it burned. But Corrigan was right about one thing. Dangerous men needed watching, and Cole was dangerous, whether he wanted to admit it or not. The guns on his hip proved it. The ease with which he'd killed 7 men proved it. The question was whether dangerous was the same as wrong. Cole didn't have an answer, wasn't sure there was one. He went upstairs to check on Mara, found her awake staring at the ceiling. I heard voices, she said. Who was that? Deputy Marshal, asking questions about Devil's Spine. Are we in trouble? No, maybe, I don't know. Cole sat on the edge of the bed. They're watching me now, waiting to see if I step out of line. Mara reached for his hand. Then we make sure you don't. We keep our heads down, rebuild quiet, don't give them any reason to look twice. And if someone else comes, if Vance wasn't the last of them, then we deal with it. Together. Without guns, if we can. With them, if we have to. She squeezed his fingers. But Cole, you can't live your whole life expecting the next fight. Eventually, you have to choose to believe in peace. He wanted to, wanted it more than anything. But peace felt like a luxury for people who hadn't seen what he'd seen, hadn't done what he'd done. Still, for Mara, he'd try. Okay, he said, we'll do it your way. Quiet, careful, clean. She smiled, tired but genuine. That's all I'm asking. The days blurred together after that. Mara grew stronger, started walking short distances without help, started talking about the future with something approaching optimism. Cole worked odd jobs, saved every cent, started planning the rebuild in his head, and slowly, carefully, he tried to become the man Mara needed him to be. The man who didn't reach for his guns first, the man who could build instead of destroy. It was harder than he expected. 2 weeks became 3, then 4. Mara's body mended slower than either of them wanted, each small improvement feeling like a victory and a reminder of how far they still had to go. The head wound healed into an angry scar that disappeared into her hairline. The burns faded from raw red to mottled pink. The broken ribs stayed broken, binding her movements, making every breath a careful calculation. Morrison said she was healing well, considering. Cole heard the unspoken part, considering she should be dead. On a Tuesday morning in late spring, Mara walked the full length of Main Street without stopping, without needing Cole's arm for support. It wasn't much by normal standards, maybe 300 yards total, but it felt like running a marathon. When they got back to Morrison's, she was grinning despite the sweat beading on her forehead. I did it, she said. You did. That means we can go home soon, start rebuilding. Cole had been dreading this conversation. Home was still a ruin, still ash and broken timber and memories that would hurt to revisit. But Mara needed it, needed to see the place again, needed to reclaim it from what Vance had done to it. Give it another week, Morrison said when they asked him. Make sure those ribs are stable. Make sure you can handle rough travel. Mara wanted to argue. Cole could see it in her eyes, but she nodded. One more week, then we go. That week felt longer than all the ones before it. Mara was restless, pacing the small room, asking Cole to describe the ruins again and again, like she was building a mental picture she could work with. Cole obliged, though each retelling felt like picking at a scab. He'd been back to the ranch twice since that first day, both times alone. The second time he'd buried his guns again, wrapped in fresh oilcloth 6 feet down in a new spot away from where the barn had stood. Symbolic, like Mara had said before, except this time it felt more like a test. Could he leave them there? Could he walk away and not look back? He didn't know yet. Oh, Deputy Marshal Corrigan showed up twice more during those weeks, asking the same questions in slightly different ways, watching Cole like a man waiting for a snake to strike. Each visit left Cole tense and angry, reminded that the law saw him as a problem, not a victim. Wickens apologized for it. He's young, eager to prove himself. Give him time, he'll move on to the next thing. But Cole wasn't sure time would fix it. Corrigan had that zealot look, the kind of lawman who saw the world in black and white, and didn't understand that most people lived in the gray spaces between. The night before they were set to leave, Cole couldn't sleep. He stood at the window of Morrison's spare room, looking out over Redemption's quiet streets, thinking about everything that had changed in a month. The town looked the same, but he'd never fit into it quite right again. People were polite, friendly even, but there was distance now. Caution. They knew what he was capable of, couldn't unknow it. Around 3 a.m, he gave up on sleep and went downstairs. Morrison was still awake, sitting at his kitchen table with a bottle of whiskey and a medical journal he wasn't really reading. Couldn't sleep either? Morrison asked. Cole shook his head. Morrison pushed the bottle across the table. Help yourself. Cole poured 2 fingers, drank it in one swallow. The burn was good, grounding. Thanks for everything you did, for Mara, for us. I know it was more than just doctoring. It's what neighbors do, what friends do. Morrison refilled his own glass. You worried about going back? Some? It'll be hard seeing the place like that. Might be harder for her than she thinks. I know. They sat in silence for a while, 2 men with nothing left to say but too tired to go their separate ways. Eventually, Morrison spoke again, voice careful. You ever think about just selling the land? Starting over somewhere new, somewhere that doesn't have all these memories attached? Cole had thought about it, had run through the scenario a dozen times in his head. Sell to some settler looking for cheap acreage, take the money and disappear into Oregon or California, build something completely new. Mara won't go for it, he said. She's got roots here. Her family's buried in the cemetery outside town, and her mother's people have been in Wyoming since before it was Wyoming. And you? Me? I'm from nowhere. Could settle anywhere and it'd be the same. Cole turned the glass in his hands. But Mara needs this place. Needs to prove she can't be driven out, can't be broken by what happened. If we run, Vance wins. Even dead, he wins. Morrison nodded slowly. That's a hard kind of pride to carry. Pride or stubbornness, I'm not sure which. Maybe both. Maybe that's what it takes to survive out here. Morrison drained his glass, set it down with a soft clink. You're a good man, Cole. Whatever else you've been, whatever you've done, you came back for her. You stayed. That counts for something. Cole wasn't sure it counted for enough, but he appreciated the sentiment. When the sun finally rose, they loaded a borrowed wagon with supplies Morrison had gathered. Medical items, food, tools, blankets. Half the town had contributed something once word got out they were heading back. Mrs. Chen gave them seeds for a kitchen garden. Patterson donated 2 hammers and a box of nails. Even people Cole barely knew dropped off items with quiet well wishes. It was charity, and it stung Cole's pride to accept it, but Mara reminded him that was what community meant. You helped when you could, accepted help when you needed it, and paid it forward when circumstances changed. They left mid-morning, Mara on the wagon seat next to Cole, Morrison standing on his porch watching them go. The doctor raised a hand in farewell, and they both returned it. Then redemption was behind them, falling away into memory and distance. The ride out was quiet. Mara seemed lost in thought, one hand pressed against her ribs unconsciously, the other gripping the wagon seat whenever they hit a rough patch. Cole kept the pace steady, careful not to jostle her too much. They'd covered about 5 miles when Mara finally spoke. "I dreamed about it last night, the ranch." "What did you dream?" "That it was still standing, that none of it had happened, that we were just coming home from town like normal." She paused. "Then I woke up and remembered." Cole didn't know what to say to that, so he just reached over and took her hand. She held on tight, staring at the horizon where their land waited. When they crested the final ridge and the ranch came into view, Mara went very still. Cole had tried to prepare her, had described it in detail, but descriptions couldn't capture the totality of destruction. The house was barely recognizable, just a few charred support beams reaching up from a foundation filled with ash. The barn was completely gone, not even a footprint left. Fence posts stood at odd angles, blackened and skeletal. The small chicken coop had collapsed into itself. 3 years of work erased. Mara's breathing hitched, just once, and then she was calm again. Too calm. The kind of calm that came from locking everything down tight so it couldn't escape. "Well," she said quietly, "it's worse than I pictured." Cole brought the wagon to a stop at the edge of what used to be their yard. "We don't have to do this now. We can camp tonight, deal with it tomorrow." "No, I need to see it." She climbed down from the wagon, moving carefully, and walked toward the ruins. Cole followed, giving her space but staying close enough to catch her if she stumbled. Mara picked her way through the wreckage, stopping here and there to examine something, to touch a piece of their old life. She found the iron stove, still intact but scorched black. Found pieces of their dishes, melted and fused together. Found the frame of their bed, warped by heat but recognizable. She stood over that frame for a long time, not saying anything. Cole waited, watching her shoulders, ready for the moment she'd break. It didn't come. Instead, she straightened up, turned to face him with dry eyes and a set jaw. "Okay," she said. "I've seen it. Now let's figure out what we're going to do about it." They spent the rest of the day taking inventory. What could be salvaged? What was completely lost? What they'd need to replace? The list of losses was long. The list of salvageable items was pathetically short. But it was a start. As the sun began to set, they set up camp away from the ruins, close to where the well still stood. One of the few structures that had survived intact. Cole got a fire going, heated up beans and coffee from Morrison's supplies. They ate in silence, exhausted and overwhelmed. After dinner, Mara stood and walked to the edge of their property, looking out over the plains that stretched toward the mountains. Cole joined her, and they stood together as the sky turned orange and purple and finally black. "I used to love this view," Mara said. "Used to sit on the porch every evening and watch the sunset." "We'll have a porch again, will we?" She looked at him. "Tell me the truth, Cole. Not the hopeful version, not the version you think I want to hear. The truth. Can we really rebuild this?" Cole considered his words carefully. "It's going to take time. Months, maybe a year. We'll have to do most of the work ourselves because we can't afford to hire help. It'll be hard, backbreaking, frustrating work. And there's no guarantee it'll turn out like it was before." "But can we do it?" "Yeah, we can do it." He met her eyes. "Won't be easy, but we can do it." Mara nodded slowly. "Then we'd better get started." They began the next morning, sorting through the ruins systematically. Anything metal that hadn't melted went into one pile. Bricks and stones for rebuilding went into another. Ash and destroyed material got hauled away from the foundation. It was slow, dirty work that left them both exhausted by midday. Cole had forgotten how physical labor could clear the mind, how the simple act of lifting and hauling and organizing could push out all the complicated thoughts. For those first few days, he was too tired to think about Vance, about the killings, about the guns buried 50 yards away. Just thought about the next load, the next pile, the next small piece of progress. Mara worked as hard as she could manage, taking frequent breaks when her ribs protested, refusing to sit idle while Cole did everything. They fell into a rhythm. Cole handling the heavy lifting, Mara sorting and organizing, both of them working until their hands were raw and their muscles screamed. On the fourth day, they had visitors. Cole saw the dust cloud first, 3 riders coming from the direction of town. His hand went instinctively to his hip, to where his guns used to ride, and found nothing. The guns were buried. He'd left them buried. He stood there watching the riders approach, fighting the urge to dig them up, knowing that reaching for a weapon every time someone appeared was exactly the habit he needed to break. The riders resolved into familiar faces. Sheriff Wickens, Patterson from the smithy, and a younger man Cole recognized as Jack Morrison, the doctor's nephew. Wickens dismounted, looked around at the cleanup work, nodded approval. Making progress. Some, Cole said. What brings you out here? Figured you could use a hand. Brought some tools, some lumber we scrounged from around town. Jack here's pretty handy with carpentry. Jack stepped forward, tipped his hat to Mara. Ma'am, my uncle said you might need help getting a shelter built before the weather turns. Mara looked at Cole, then back at the visitors. We appreciate the thought, but we can't afford to pay anyone right now. Wasn't asking for pay, Jack said. Just offering help. Patterson spoke up, his voice rough from years of breathing forge smoke. Town takes care of its own. You're one of us, whether you feel like it or not. Cole felt something catch in his throat. He'd been so focused on the distance he'd sensed from people, the caution and wariness, that he'd missed this. The quiet support, the practical help offered without fanfare. Thank you, he managed. They worked together for the next week. Jack and Cole framed up a small cabin. Nothing fancy, just 4 walls and a roof to get them through to winter. Patterson helped with the metalwork, fashioning hinges and handles from salvaged iron. Wickens came out when he could, usually bringing someone else from town with him. Word spread, and soon there was a rotating crew of neighbors showing up with supplies or labor. Not everyone, some folks still kept their distance, but enough that the cabin came together faster than Cole had dared hope. Mara organized it all, despite her lingering injuries. She couldn't lift heavy loads, but she could direct traffic, keep track of what they had and what they needed, make sure people got fed when they worked through lunch. Cole watched her transform from the broken woman Morrison had patched together into something closer to herself again. Not all the way there, not yet, but healing in ways that went beyond the physical. The cabin was finished on a Friday, just before sunset. It was small, maybe a quarter the size of the house they'd lost, with rough planed walls and a floor that wasn't quite level. But it was solid, weatherproof, and theirs. Everyone who'd helped gathered outside as Cole and Mara stood in the doorway, looking in at the empty room that would be their new home. It's not much, Jack said, almost apologetically. It's everything, Mara replied. They had a small celebration, nothing fancy, just coffee and some biscuits Mrs. Chen had sent, and then people started heading back to town as the light failed. Wickens was the last to leave. You did good work here, he told Cole. Both of you. Couldn't have done it without help. That's the point. You're not alone out here, even when it feels like you are. Wickens mounted his horse, settled into the saddle. Deputy Corrigan came by my office again yesterday. Cole tensed. What did he want? Same thing as always. Asked if there'd been any trouble, if you'd done anything questionable. I told him the most questionable thing you'd done was accept charity without complaint, which is pretty out of character. Wickens smiled slightly. He'll get bored eventually. Until then, just keep doing what you're doing. After he left, Cole and Mara went inside their new cabin. It smelled like fresh-cut pine and possibility. They had bedrolls from Morrison's donations, a small stove Patterson had repaired, some basic supplies. Not much, but enough to start. That night, lying in the dark with Mara curled against his side, Cole felt something he hadn't felt in weeks. Not peace exactly, but maybe the beginning of it. The absence of immediate threat, the presence of forward motion. We're going to make it, Mara whispered. Yeah, Cole agreed. We are. The next months were a blur of work. They expanded the cabin, adding a second room and a proper kitchen. Rebuilt the chicken coop and bought 6 hens from a farmer 20 miles south. Started construction on a new barn, slower this time because it was just the 2 of them and Mara still couldn't do heavy work. Cole learned to work with aching muscles and blistered hands, learned to measure twice and cut once, learned patience when things didn't go right the first time. It wasn't the same as building before. that had been joyful, optimistic, two people creating a future together. This was grimmer, more determined, building because they had to, because giving up wasn't an option. But somewhere in those months, something shifted. The work stopped feeling like penance and started feeling like purpose. The cabin became home, familiar and comfortable. The new barn took shape, solid and straight. The chickens laid eggs, and they had fresh food again. Small victories, but they added up. Deputy Marshal Corrigan showed up twice more, each visit shorter than the last. He looked around at the progress, asked his questions, seemed disappointed that Cole was just a man building a ranch and not some outlaw in waiting. On his last visit, Cole was on the barn roof, hammering down shingles. Corrigan called up to him. "You seem to have settled in pretty well." Cole didn't stop working. "Doing my best. Marshal Wade wanted me to inform you that the case regarding the Devil's Spine incident has been closed. No charges will be filed." Cole's hammer paused mid-swing. "That it?" "That's it. Officially, you're clear." Corrigan shifted his weight, uncomfortable. "Unofficially, he wanted you to know that you're still being watched. Any future incidents will be viewed with extra scrutiny." "Won't be any future incidents. For your sake, I hope that's true." Corrigan tipped his hat. "Take care, Mr. Hale." He rode off, and Cole watched him go, feeling like a weight had lifted. Not completely gone, but lighter. The law was satisfied, or at least willing to let it rest. That was more than he'd expected. That evening, he told Mara about it. She smiled, the first genuine, unguarded smile he'd seen from her in months. "It's really over then. We can stop looking over our shoulders." Cole wanted to believe that. Wanted to think that killing Vance had ended the threat permanently, that no one else from his old life would come looking. But some paranoid part of him stayed alert, listening for hoofbeats in the night, scanning the horizon for riders who didn't belong. Old habits died hard. Summer faded into fall. The barn was finished, and they managed to buy 2 horses, nothing fancy, just working animals, to help with the plowing and hauling. Mara's garden produced vegetables, not a lot, but enough to supplement their stores. They canned what they could, prepared for winter like people who'd learned the hard way that comfort was temporary. One evening in late September, Mara brought up something she'd been avoiding. "We need to talk about money." Cole looked up from the harness he was mending. "What about it?" "We're running low, real low. What we saved before the attack is mostly gone, and what people donated got us through the summer but won't get us through winter." She sat down across from him, hands folded. "We need income." "I know. The ranch won't turn a profit for at least another year, probably 2. We don't have livestock to sell, don't have crops worth selling. We need something else." She paused. "I've been thinking about taking in laundry. There's enough people in Redemption who'd pay for the service." The thought of Mara doing other people's washing, bent over a washboard for hours with her ribs still tender, made Cole's stomach turn. But she was right. They needed money, and options were limited. "What about me?" he asked. "I could find work in town. Patterson's always complaining he needs help at the smithy. Could you stand it? Being in town all day, dealing with people, having them watch you?" Honestly, no. But necessity didn't care about comfort. "I'll do what needs doing," he said. They tried it for a month. Cole worked at Patterson's smithy 3 days a week, doing the heavy work the old man couldn't manage anymore. It paid decent, enough to keep them fed with a little left over. But it was hard in ways Cole hadn't anticipated. Working in town meant being visible, meant people seeing him every day and forming opinions. Most folks were fine, treated him normal. But there were others who crossed the street when they saw him coming, who whispered to their children to stay away. The ones who still saw him as dangerous, unpredictable. Cole tried not to let it bother him. Tried to focus on the work, on the money, on providing for Mara. But some days it felt like wearing a brand, like everyone could see the blood on his hands even though he'd scrubbed them clean. Patterson noticed, of course. The old smith didn't miss much. "People will talk," he said one afternoon while they were working. "Can't stop them, but most of it's just noise. The ones who matter, the ones worth knowing, they'll see you for what you are now, not what you were." "And what am I now?" Patterson looked at him over the forge, eyes sharp. "A man trying. That's more than most can say." It helped, hearing that. Didn't fix everything, but it helped. The first snow came in early November, light flurries that melted by afternoon but signaled harder weather ahead. Cole and Mara finished winterizing the cabin, stuffing gaps with cloth and clay, stacking firewood against the north wall. The barn was solid, ready to shelter the horses through the worst of it. They were as prepared as they could be. One evening, with snow falling steady outside and a fire crackling in the stove, Mara brought up something she'd been holding back. "I want to have a baby." Cole looked up from the boot he was resoling, startled. "What?" "A baby. A family." She set down her sewing, met his eyes. "I know the timing's not perfect, and we're still barely scraping by, but I don't want to wait anymore. Don't want Vance and what happened to dictate when we get to start our family." Cole's mind raced. A baby meant more mouths to feed, more vulnerability, more things that could go wrong, but it also meant hope, meant believing in a future worth bringing new life into. "Are you sure?" he asked. "I'm sure. We've been through hell and made it out the other side. We've got a home, we've got each other, and we've got time. I want to use it." She reached across the table, took his hand. "What do you think?" Cole thought about a lot of things. About the guns still buried outside, about Deputy Corrigan's warnings, about the possibility that his past might catch up with them again, about bringing a child into a world that could be cruel and violent and unforgiving. But he also thought about Mara's strength, about the community that had helped them rebuild, about the kind of father he could try to be. Not perfect, probably not even good at first, but trying, always trying. "I think," he said slowly, "that we'd make good parents." Mara's face lit up with a smile that made everything else, all the pain and fear and uncertainty, feel worth it. They talked late into the night, making plans that felt both impossible and inevitable. A child would change everything, would give them something to build toward beyond just survival. It was terrifying and exciting in equal measure. As winter settled in hard and the ranch went quiet under snow, Cole found himself thinking about the future differently. Not as something to fear or guard against, but as something to shape actively. They'd start small, finish paying off their debts, expand the herd, maybe add on to the cabin, build something stable enough to support a family. It wouldn't be easy. Nothing worth doing ever was. But they'd done harder things, had survived worse. On Christmas morning, not that they celebrated much, but Mara liked to mark the day, Cole gave her a wooden box he'd made in Patterson's shop. Simple construction, dovetailed corners, lid that fit snug. Inside, he'd carved her initials and a date. The day they'd first arrived at the ranch, 3 years ago. Mara cried when she opened it, which wasn't what Cole had intended, but seemed right somehow. "It's for keeping things," he said. "Important things. Things you don't want to lose." She held it like it was made of glass, running her fingers over the carved letters. "It's perfect." They spent the day inside, staying warm, eating the special meal Mara had prepared with their limited supplies. It wasn't much: venison stew, cornbread, preserved fruit, but it felt like abundance. Felt like a celebration of still being here, still being together. That night, lying in bed with snow piling against the windows and the stove ticking as it cooled, Mara spoke into the darkness. "Do you think about them? The men you killed?" Cole had been expecting this question for months. "Sometimes." "Do you regret it?" That was harder to answer honestly. "I regret that it had to happen, that Vance pushed things to where killing him was the only option. But the act itself?" He paused, searching for truth. "No. I'd do it again if I had to. Even knowing what it cost you?" Even then, Mara was quiet for a long moment. "I think about them too. Not the men, but what they did to me. What they took." Her voice stayed steady, controlled. "Some days I'm fine, and other days I'm back there, feeling it happen all over again. And I get so angry, Cole. So angry I can barely breathe." He pulled her closer, careful of her ribs even though they'd mostly healed. "You're allowed to be angry. I know. But I don't want to be. Don't want to carry that forever." She shifted, looking up at him in the dim light from the stove. "How do you let go of something like that?" "I don't know that you do. Let go, I mean. Maybe you just learn to carry it differently, make it part of you instead of all of you." "Is that what you've done?" "Trying to." They held each other in the dark, two people carrying their own weights, helping each other stay upright. It wasn't the life they'd imagined 3 years ago, wasn't peaceful or simple or uncomplicated, but it was real. And it was theirs. and that counted for something. Winter held on through January and into February, harsh and unforgiving. They lost 3 chickens to a fox that got into the coop, lost 2 weeks to Cole being sick with something that left him weak and feverish. But they made it through, day by day, storm by storm. When the first thaw came in early March, Cole went back to work at Patterson's smithy, building up their savings again. Mara started taking in laundry like she'd planned, working carefully to not strain herself. The money was tight, but it was money. It was progress. One afternoon at the smithy, a stranger rode into town. Cole noticed him immediately, the way you notice anything out of place, anything that might be a threat. The man was middle-aged, well-dressed, riding a good horse. He stopped at the sheriff's office, went inside. Cole tried to ignore the prickle of unease, told himself it was nothing. But he kept one eye on the office while he worked, watching for when the man emerged. 20 minutes later, the stranger came out with Wickens, and they both headed toward the smithy. Cole's hands tightened on his hammer. Patterson noticed, followed his gaze. "Trouble?" the old man asked quietly. "Maybe. Don't know yet." Wickens and the stranger stopped just inside the smithy door. The sheriff's face was carefully neutral. "Cole, this is Mr. Brennan from the Denver office of the Territorial Land Commission. He wanted to have a word with you." Brennan stepped forward, hand extended. "Mr. Hale, pleasure to meet you." Cole shook his hand warily. "What's this about?" "I'll get straight to it. There's been some interest in your property, specifically the land itself. A mining company out of Denver believes there may be valuable mineral deposits in the rock formations near your ranch. They've authorized me to make you an offer." The words hung in the air. Cole processed them slowly, looking for the trap. An offer. To purchase your land. They're prepared to pay well above market value, given the potential for mineral rights. Brennan pulled a paper from his jacket, unfolded it. Specifically, they're offering $5,000 for your 160 acres. $5,000. More money than Cole had ever seen in one place. Enough to buy a new ranch somewhere else. Somewhere without the ghosts. Enough to start completely fresh. "I'm not interested," Cole said. Brennan blinked. "Mr. Hale, I don't think you understand the magnitude of this offer. $5,000 is... I understand fine, and I'm not selling. Perhaps you'd like to discuss it with your wife first. This is a significant decision. My wife and I are of one mind on this. The land's not for sale." Brennan's friendly demeanor cracked slightly. "Mr. Hale, I should inform you that the company is prepared to pursue other avenues if you're not willing to negotiate. There are legal mechanisms for what?" Cole stepped forward, not threatening, but not backing down either. "For forcing me off my own land? Good luck with that." Wickens cleared his throat. "Mr. Brennan, I think you've got your answer." Cole's made his position clear. Brennan's jaw tightened, but he refolded his paper and tucked it away. "Very well, but the offer stands should you change your mind. Sometimes circumstances change and opportunities like this don't come around twice." After he left, Wickens stayed behind. "You sure about this?" "Yeah, that land's ours. Bought it, built on it, bled for it. I'm not handing it over because some mining company thinks there might be silver in the rocks." "What if they push?" "Then they push. We'll deal with it." Wickens nodded slowly. "All right. Just wanted to make sure you knew what you were turning down." "I know exactly what I'm turning down." That evening, Cole told Mara about Brennan's visit. She listened without interrupting, face unreadable. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment, then she smiled. $5,000. That's a lot of money." "It is. And you said no without even asking me." "Should I have asked?" "No." She took his hand. "You were right. That land's ours. No amount of money changes that. Even if it means we struggle, even if it means we could have an easier life somewhere else. Easier isn't always better, and that land, that ranch, it's not just property, Cole, it's proof. Proof that we survived, that we built something worth protecting." Her grip tightened. "We're not running. Not from mining companies. Not from our past. Not from anything." Cole felt something settle in his chest, some last piece of doubt finally finding its place. "Then we're agreed." "We're agreed." But the visit from Brennan nagged at him over the following days. Mining companies didn't just make offers and walk away. They had resources, lawyers, ways of getting what they wanted. If there really was valuable ore on their land, the company wouldn't stop at a polite offer. He mentioned it to Patterson, who confirmed his suspicions. "They'll be back," the old smith said. "Maybe with better offers, maybe with pressure. Either way, they'll be back." "What would you do?" Patterson thought about it, working the bellows on his forge. "Depends. If I had something worth protecting, family, home, future, I'd protect it. But I'd also be smart about it. Know the law, know my rights. Don't give them any excuse to paint you as unreasonable or violent." That last part stuck with Cole. Don't give them any excuse. He'd spent months building a reputation as someone stable, someone who'd put his violent past behind him. One wrong move and it could all crumble, give Brennan's company the ammunition they needed to paint him as a dangerous squatter, someone who needed removing for public safety. He had to be careful, had to be smart, had to prove that he could defend what was his without becoming the man everyone feared he might still be. It was a tightrope, and Cole had never been good with balance. Brennan came back 3 weeks later, and this time he wasn't alone. Cole was working on extending the corral when he saw the riders approaching. 4 men on horseback, Brennan in front wearing the same expensive coat, looking like he'd just stepped out of a Denver hotel. The 3 behind him had a different quality. Harder faces, gun belts worn low and comfortable. Not cowboys, not prospectors. Hired muscle. Cole set down his hammer slowly, wiped his hands on his pants. Mara was inside the cabin, washing dishes. He could see her through the window, could see the moment she noticed the riders, and went still. Brennan dismounted, left his men on their horses. Smart move, or maybe just calculated, less threatening to approach alone. But the backup was visible, impossible to ignore. "Mr. Hale, I hope you've had time to reconsider our offer." "Told you last time, not interested." "Yes, well, the company hoped you might have gained some perspective." Brennan pulled out another paper, different from the first one. "We've increased our offer to $6,000. That's generous by any measure. Could be 10,000. Answers still no." Brennan's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Hale, I understand you formed an attachment to this land, but sentiment doesn't pay bills. The company is prepared to be very reasonable, very accommodating. You could take this money, buy twice the acreage somewhere else, start fresh without all the—" He gestured vaguely at the rebuilt cabin, the still visible scars of the fire. Difficult memories. "My memories are my business." "Of course. Of course." Brennan folded the paper but didn't put it away. "However, I should inform you that the company has filed a claim with the Territorial Land Office. There's some question about whether your original deed was properly recorded, whether all the fees were paid. It's all very bureaucratic and tedious, but these things have to be verified." Cole's hands clenched. "My deed's legal, paid for fair and square." "I'm sure it is, but the verification process can take time, months sometimes. And during that time, if the company were to discover that you were, say, operating on disputed land—" Brennan spread his hands. "Well, that would complicate things considerably." The threat was clear, wrapped in polite language but unmistakable. They'd tie him up in legal knots, make him spend money he didn't have on lawyers and filings, drag it out until he had no choice but to sell. "That legal?" Cole asked quietly. "Perfectly. The company has excellent attorneys. They know all the relevant statutes, all the proper procedures." Brennan finally tucked the paper away. "Of course, all of this unpleasantness could be avoided if you simply accepted our very generous offer. Cash payment, clear title transfer, everyone walks away satisfied." The cabin door opened. Mara stepped out, still holding a dish towel, face calm but eyes sharp. "My husband gave you his answer," she said. "Twice now. How many times do you need to hear no before you understand it?" Brennan tipped his hat to her. "Mrs. Hale, I was just explaining to your husband that—" "I heard what you were explaining. Threats dressed up as business talk." She came down the steps, stood next to Cole. "You think we're simple people who'll fold the first time someone waves legal papers at us? You're wrong. I assure you, Mrs. Hale, we have no desire to—" "You have every desire to take our land without paying what it's worth. $6,000 sounds like a lot until you consider what you're planning to pull out of the ground. How much is the mineral deposit worth? 50,000? 100,000? Brennan's expression flickered just for a second. Surprised that this frontier woman had done the math, had seen through the generosity to the calculation beneath. The potential value of the minerals is speculative at best, he said. The company is taking a significant risk. Then they can take that risk somewhere else. Mara crossed her arms. Our land's not for sale. Not at 6,000, not at 10,000, not at any price you're willing to pay. If you think there's an issue with our deed, take it up with the land office. We'll be happy to provide documentation. Brennan's pleasant mask slipped further. Mrs. Hale, I don't think you understand the position you're in. The company has resources, connections. They can make life very difficult for people who stand in their way. Is that a threat? It's a reality. Cole stepped forward, putting himself slightly between Brennan and Mara. Time for you to leave. Mr. Hale, now. Brennan looked at him for a long moment, and Cole saw the calculation happening. Push harder and risk violence? Back off and try a different angle? The three hired men shifted in their saddles, hands drifting toward weapons. Finally, Brennan stepped back. Very well, but this conversation isn't over. The company will pursue its legal options. And Mr. Hale? He paused, already mounting his horse. I'd be very careful about how you conduct yourself going forward. Men with your background often find that legal proceedings don't go in their favor, especially when they have a history of violence. He rode off with his men, leaving Cole and Mara standing in the yard, anger and worry churning in equal measure. He knows about Devil's Spine, Cole said quietly. Of course he does. He did his research, found the leverage. Mara watched the riders disappear toward town. They're going to come at us hard, aren't they? Yeah. What do we do? Cole thought about it, about the guns still buried, about the easy solution that violence offered, about how simple it would be to make this problem disappear the way he'd made Vance disappear, and about how that was exactly what Brennan wanted. Proof that Cole Hale was still the dangerous man from the stories, still someone who solved problems with bullets instead of law. We get a lawyer, he said. We fight this the right way. With what money? We'll find it. Sell something, borrow if we have to. He turned to her. But we do this clean. We don't give them ammunition. Mara nodded, but her face was tight with worry. What if the law's not enough? What if they've already bought the judges, the land office, everyone who matters? Then we find another way. But we try legal first. They went into town the next morning, looking for anyone who might help. Wickens listened to their story, his expression growing darker with each detail. Consolidated Mineral Holdings, he said when they finished. I've heard of them. They've got operations all over Colorado and Wyoming, got a reputation for getting what they want one way or another. How do we fight them? Mara asked. Honestly, you probably can't. Not if they're determined. Wickens leaned back in his chair, thinking. But you might be able to slow them down, make it expensive enough that they decide it's not worth the trouble. They're counting on you being poor and isolated, easy to push around. You need to prove them wrong. How? For starters, get your deed verified independently. Don't wait for them to challenge it. Prove it's legitimate before they can create doubt. There's a land surveyor in Cheyenne, honest man named Hutchins. Pay him to come out, verify your boundaries, confirm everything's in order. That'll cost money, Cole said. Everything worthwhile does. But it's cheaper than fighting a legal battle you're already losing. Wickens pulled out a piece of paper, started writing. There's also a lawyer in town, Marcus Webb. He's young, inexperienced, but he's smart and he's honest. Won't charge you as much as a Denver lawyer would. Will he be any good against Consolidated's attorneys? Probably not. But he can file the right paperwork, make sure you're protected procedurally, and sometimes that's enough to make the other side reconsider. They found Marcus Webb in a cramped office above the general store, surrounded by law books that looked older than he was. He couldn't have been more than 28, with ink-stained fingers and an earnest face that made Cole immediately doubt Wickens' recommendation. But Webb listened to their story without interrupting, took notes, asked sharp questions that showed he understood the situation better than his age suggested. They're running a standard intimidation campaign, Webb said when they finished. Challenge the deed, tie you up in bureaucracy, make it expensive and exhausting until you give up. It's effective because most people can't afford to fight back. Can we? Mara asked. Maybe, if we're smart about it. Webb spread his notes out on the desk. First, we need to verify your deed is absolutely airtight. No gaps, no missing signatures, all fees paid and recorded. Second, we file a formal objection to their claim, force them to prove their case, instead of just making allegations. Third, we make noise. Get the territorial newspaper involved. Make this public. Companies like Consolidated hate publicity, makes them look like bullies. That'll make them angry, Cole said. It will. But they're already planning to take your land. Might as well fight back. Webb looked between them. I won't lie to you, this is going to be hard. They have more money, more lawyers, more everything. But if you're willing to fight, I'll help you. What's it going to cost? Mara asked. Webb named a figure that made Cole's stomach drop. Not impossible, but it would take everything they had saved and then some. We'll find it, Mara said before Cole could speak. Do whatever needs doing. They left Webb's office with a list of tasks and a timeline that felt impossibly tight. The land surveyor would cost another chunk of money they didn't have. Filing fees, document requests, all the small expenses that added up to more than they could afford. That night, lying in bed, Mara brought up what they'd both been thinking. We could take their money. $6,000 would set us up somewhere else. Somewhere without all this fighting. Cole stared at the ceiling. You want to sell? I want to not be crushed by people with more power than we have. I want to not worry that we're going to lose everything anyway, just slower and more painfully. She rolled toward him. But I also don't want to give them the satisfaction. Don't want to prove that ordinary people can't stand up to companies like Consolidated. So what do? We fight, but we do it smart, like you said. And if we lose, she paused. If we lose, at least we tried. At least we didn't just roll over. Cole pulled her close, felt her breath against his chest. We're not going to lose. How do you know? Because we can't afford to. The next week was a blur of paperwork and preparations. Cole sold one of their horses to pay for the surveyor. Mara took on extra laundry work, even though it left her exhausted and aching. Webb filed their objection to Consolidated's claim, sent letters to the territorial newspaper, did everything in his limited power to slow the machinery grinding toward them. Hutchins the surveyor arrived on a Wednesday, a precise man with expensive equipment and a reputation for honesty. He spent 2 days walking every inch of their property, checking boundaries against the deed, verifying landmarks. On the second evening, he came to the cabin with his report. Your deed's solid, he said. Everything matches. All the corners are where they should be. No discrepancies I can find. Whoever filed the original survey knew what they were doing. Relief flooded through Cole. So Consolidated can't challenge it? They can try, but they won't succeed. Not on technical grounds, anyway. Hutchins accepted the coffee Mara offered, warmed his hands on the cup. But Mr. Hale, you should know. I saw evidence of recent mineral testing on your property. Someone's been drilling core samples, probably in the last month. Cole went cold. Where? North Ridge, near those rock formations. They're being careful, keeping it subtle, but the signs are there if you know what to look for. They're already assuming they'll get the land, Mara said. Looks like it. And if they're drilling, they've found something. Otherwise, they wouldn't be pushing this hard. Hutchins set down his cup. Whatever's under your land, it's valuable. Very valuable. After he left, Cole and Mara sat in silence, processing the implications. Consolidated wasn't making a speculative offer. They knew what was there had already started the work, which meant they weren't going to back off, weren't going to be discouraged by legal objections or bad publicity. They were going to take this land one way or another. We need more help, Cole said finally. From who? Everyone we know is in the same boat we are, barely scraping by, no resources to fight a company like Consolidated. Cole thought about the guns buried outside, about the direct solution violence offered, but he pushed the thought away, focused on other options. What about the other ranchers, the homesteaders? If Consolidated can do this to us, they can do it to anyone. Maybe if we all stand together, you think they'll risk it? Risk everything to help us? I don't know, but we have to try. They spent the next several days visiting neighboring ranches and homesteads, telling their story, asking for support. The responses were mixed. Some people were sympathetic but scared, unwilling to put themselves in Consolidated's crosshairs. Others were hostile, saw Cole and Mara as troublemakers bringing problems to the territory. But a few listened. A few understood that if Consolidated could force one family off their land, they could do it to anyone. Old Man Jessup, who ran cattle on the property east of theirs, was the first to commit. I remember when companies like that came through in the 50s, he said. pushed out half the miners in California, took claims that weren't theirs. We let them win then, and look what happened. I won't make that mistake twice. Sarah Chen, the widow who'd given them garden seeds months ago, was next. My husband bought our land with money he saved for 15 years. Nobody's taking it without a fight. One by one, they built a coalition. Not everyone, not even most people, but enough to make noise to show that Consolidated wasn't just fighting one stubborn couple. Webb was thrilled. This is exactly what we need. Strength in numbers, public support. I'll draft a petition, get everyone to sign, submit it to the territorial legislature. Will that help? Mara asked. It'll make it harder for them to just steamroll you. Politicians don't like angry constituents. Webb was already writing, ideas pouring out faster than his pen could keep up. We'll argue this is about property rights, about protecting settlers from corporate overreach. Make it bigger than just your ranch. It was smart strategy, turning their personal fight into a broader issue. But it also meant more exposure, more attention, more chances for someone to dig into Cole's past and use it against them. As if summoned by the thought, Deputy Marshal Corrigan appeared in Redemption 2 days later. He found Cole at Patterson's smithy, working the bellows while the old man shaped a horseshoe. Mr. Hale, heard you've been causing trouble. Cole didn't look up from his work. Defending my property isn't causing trouble. Organizing resistance against a legitimate business operation? That's getting close. Corrigan leaned against the doorframe. Consolidated has friends in Cheyenne. Friends who don't appreciate agitators stirring up the settlers. Then Consolidated should stop trying to steal land that isn't theirs. That's for the courts to decide. Not you, not your neighbors, not some inexperienced lawyer filing nuisance petitions. Corrigan's voice hardened. I'm here to remind you that you're on thin ice, Mr. Hale. One misstep, one hint of the violence you're capable of, and those friends I mentioned will come down on you hard. Patterson spoke up, his voice gravelly. The boy's done nothing wrong. He's using the law, same as Consolidated. That's what the law's for, isn't it? The law's for maintaining order. And order gets disrupted when people with violent pasts start organizing resistance movements. Corrigan pushed off the doorframe. I'll be watching, Mr. Hale. Very closely. After he left, Patterson shook his head. That one's going to be a problem. Yeah. You thinking about those guns you buried? Cole's hand stilled on the bellows. How'd you know about that? I'm old, not blind. And I know men like you. The way you move, the way you watch doors and windows, the way your hand drifts to your hip when you're nervous. You were something once, something dangerous. Question is, whether you still are. I'm trying not to be. Trying's good, but trying doesn't always win against men who don't care about rules. Patterson returned to his work, hammer ringing against hot iron. Just saying, sometimes the law fails. And when it does, you need another option. Cole didn't respond, but the words stayed with him. He'd been operating on the assumption that following the law, doing things the right way, would be enough. But what if it wasn't? What if Consolidated bought every judge, intimidated every official, made it impossible to win legally? What then? The answer scared him because he already knew it, already felt it pulling at him, that familiar clarity violence offered. The simple equation, threat plus response equals resolution. He pushed it down, focused on the work, tried to believe that civilization meant more than just the strong taking from the weak. Webb filed the petition with 63 signatures, representing nearly a quarter of the settled families in the territory. The territorial newspaper ran the story, framing it as settlers versus corporate greed. For a brief moment, public opinion swung their way. Then Consolidated responded. They brought in their own surveyors who conveniently found irregularities in the original survey work. They produced documents suggesting the land had been improperly transferred from territorial to private ownership, that fees had been miscalculated, that the whole thing was legally questionable. It was all fabrication, but it was well-documented fabrication, stamped and notarized and official-looking, the kind of thing that would take months to untangle, that would require lawyers and counter-experts and money nobody had. Webb did his best, filing objections, demanding hearings, but he was one inexperienced attorney against a team of expensive specialists. They buried him in paperwork, tied him up in procedure, made every small step take 3 times as long as it should. And while the legal battle dragged on, things started happening on the ranch. First, Someone cut their fences during the night, let their horses wander off. Took Cole 2 days to find and round them up. Then their well was contaminated, rendered undrinkable by something that made the water smell like sulfur and death. They had to haul water from town until they could dig a new one. Then came the fire. Cole woke to the smell of smoke, the sound of crackling. His first thought was Vance. Was the attack happening again? He was out of bed before he was fully awake, grabbing for guns that weren't there. But this wasn't the house. This was the barn. He ran outside, saw flames already climbing the walls, eating through the wood they'd spent months cutting and fitting. Mara was right behind him, both of them scrambling to get the horses out before the whole structure collapsed. They saved the animals, but nothing else. The barn burned to the ground for the second time, and this time they both knew it wasn't an accident. Wickens came out the next morning, examined the scene, found the evidence he expected to find: lamp oil, deliberate ignition, arson. "Who do you think did it?" he asked, though his tone said he already knew. "Who do you think?" Cole was exhausted, covered in soot, watching the smoke still rising from the ruins. Consolidated wants us gone. This is how they're making it happen. "You have proof?" "No. Just like they don't have proof when they claim our deeds invalid. But we both know the truth." Wickens was quiet for a moment, then spoke carefully. "Cole, I know what you're thinking. I know what you're capable of. But if you go after them, if you do anything that looks like retaliation, you'll lose everything. Not just the ranch, your freedom, your future, everything. So I just take it? Let them burn my property, threaten my wife, destroy what we've built. You use the law. You fight back legally. The law's failing, Tom. You know it. I know it. They've got more money, more influence, more everything. We can't win this way. You can't win the other way either. You kill someone connected to Consolidated, and they'll hang you for it. Or worse, they'll drag it out, make an example of you, show every other settler what happens when you resist." Wickens put a hand on Cole's shoulder. "I know it's hard. I know it feels like they're getting away with it, but you have to trust the process." Cole wanted to laugh at that. Trust the process, as if the process hadn't been bought and paid for, as if justice was something that happened instead of something you had to fight for with everything you had. But he swallowed the bitterness, nodded. "I'll try. That's all I'm asking." After Wickens left, Mara came and stood beside him, looking at the charred remains of their second barn. "We can't rebuild this time," she said quietly. "We don't have the money or the materials, and even if we did, they'd just burn it again." "I know. So what do we do?" Cole was silent for a long time, wrestling with the answer. Finally, he spoke, voice low and rough. "We make them think they've won." Mara looked at him sharply. "What?" "We stop fighting publicly. We tell Webb to drop the legal challenges, tell the other ranchers we're backing down. Make Consolidated think we're beaten, that we're ready to negotiate. And then? And then we wait. See what their next move is. If they think they've won, they'll get careless, show their hand." He met her eyes. "I'm not giving up, Mara. I'm just changing tactics." She studied his face, looking for something. Whatever she saw made her nod slowly. "Okay, we try it your way, but Cole, don't do anything that crosses the line. Don't become what they're trying to make you into." "I won't," he said, and hoped he was telling the truth. They went to Webb the next day, told him to stop fighting. The young lawyer looked stricken. "You're giving up? After everything?" "We're being practical," Mara said. "We can't afford to keep fighting. Can't afford the legal fees, can't afford to rebuild what they destroy. It's over." Webb argued, tried to convince them to hold on just a little longer, but eventually he accepted their decision. He looked defeated, like they'd validated every doubt he'd ever had about justice and fairness. Word spread quickly. The coalition of ranchers fell apart, everyone retreating to their own properties, relieved they wouldn't have to risk themselves after all. The newspaper ran a follow-up story about the settlers who'd challenged Consolidated and lost, using it as a cautionary tale about fighting battles you can't win. Brennan showed up 3 days later, looking smug. "Mr. Hale, I heard you've reconsidered." "We're willing to discuss terms," Cole said carefully. "Excellent. The company is prepared to offer $5,000 given the recent difficulties with the property." Less than before. They were punishing him for fighting back, making sure he understood the cost of resistance. We'll need time to think about it, Mara said. Of course, take a week. But after that, the offer drops to 4,000. The company's patience has limits. Brennan smiled. I'm glad you're being reasonable. It'll make everything so much simpler. After he left, Cole and Mara sat on the cabin steps, watching the sunset paint the mountains red and gold. You think they'll stop now? Mara asked. Now that they think they've won? For a bit, long enough to get comfortable to stop watching their backs. Cole's voice was flat, emotionless. That's when we'll see who they really are. And if we don't like what we see? Cole didn't answer. Didn't need to. They both knew what came next if the law failed completely, if there was no civilized solution left. They'd been pushed to this edge once before, and it had cost them everything they'd built. Now they were back at that same precipice, staring down into the same darkness. The difference was, this time Cole knew exactly what waited for him down there. And this time, he wasn't sure he had the strength to pull himself back. The week passed in strange quiet. No more fires, no more sabotage. Consolidated seemed to believe they'd broken Cole and Mara, that the fight was over. Brennan even sent a polite note reminding them of the deadline, the offer dropping to 4,000 if they didn't accept by Friday. Cole used the time to watch, to learn patterns. He noted when Consolidated's men came and went from their surveying camp on the North Ridge, noted who stayed late, who left early, who was careless with security. He didn't tell Mara what he was doing, didn't want to burden her with the knowledge. But she knew anyway. She always knew. On Thursday night, she found him sitting outside the cabin, staring at the spot where his guns were buried. You're thinking about digging them up, she said. Not a question. I'm thinking about a lot of things. She sat down beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. What happened to doing this the smart way? The legal way? The legal way failed. They've bought everyone who matters, broken everything we tried to build. Tomorrow Brennan's going to come here expecting us to sign papers, and if we don't, they'll just take the land anyway. Make up some reason, forge some documents, and we'll be out with nothing. So what's the alternative? You kill Brennan? Kill all of Consolidated's men? Burn their camp? Mara's voice was steady, but he heard the fear underneath. And then what, Cole? Even if you survive it, even if you manage to scare them off, you'll be a wanted man. We'll be fugitives. Is that better than losing the ranch? Cole didn't have a good answer to that. The old him, the one who rode with Vance, would have said yes without hesitation. Violence solved problems, and consequences were for later. But he'd spent 6 years learning that later always came, that blood had a price that compounded over time. I don't know what to do, he admitted. Every option feels wrong. Mara was quiet for a moment, then spoke carefully. What if we took their money? Not because we're beaten, but because we're choosing something different. Like what? Like starting over somewhere they can't find us. Taking that $4,000? I know it's less than we deserve, but it's still more money than most people see in a lifetime. And building something new. Maybe in Oregon or California. Somewhere without all these ghosts. The suggestion hung between them, tempting and terrible in equal measure. It would mean admitting defeat, letting Consolidated win. But it would also mean freedom, safety, a chance at the peaceful life they'd been trying to build. You really want that? Cole asked. I want you alive. I want us to have a future that doesn't involve wondering when the next attack is coming, when the next Vance or Brennan is going to appear. She took his hand. I'm tired of fighting, Cole. Tired of being afraid. If taking their money and leaving means we get to be happy somewhere else, maybe that's not losing. Maybe that's just being smart enough to know when to walk away. Cole thought about it, really thought about it. Imagined selling, packing what little they had, riding west toward new territory, finding land that didn't have burned barns and bad memories attached, starting completely fresh, with enough money to do it right this time. It could work. They could make it work. But something in him rebelled at the idea. Not pride exactly, or stubbornness, though those were part of it. Something deeper. The knowledge that running from this would mean running forever, that Consolidated and companies like them would always be there, would always be taking from people who couldn't fight back. I need to think, he said finally. Don't think too long. Brennan's coming tomorrow. That night, Cole dreamed of the canyon again. Of Vance's face in that last second, of the bodies cooling in the desert sun. But this time, when he turned to leave, there were more bodies behind him. Brennan, Corrigan, faceless men in expensive suits, and standing among them, watching him with disappointed eyes, was Mara. He woke before dawn, sweating, the dream clinging to him like smoke. Mara was still asleep, breathing steady and peaceful. Cole dressed quietly, went outside into the pre-dawn cold. The land was beautiful this time of day, washed in gray light that turned everything soft and undefined. He walked to the ridge where their house had stood, looked out over the plains stretching toward distant mountains. This view, this land, they'd chosen it together, built their dreams on it. Letting it go felt like amputation, like cutting away a piece of himself. But keeping it might cost everything else. He was still standing there when he heard the horses. Not Brennan, it was too early for that. These were different riders, coming from town at speed. Cole tensed, hand moving instinctively toward his hip before he remembered the guns weren't there. The riders resolved into familiar shapes: Wickens, Patterson, and Marcus Webb. They pulled up hard, dismounted fast. "Cole," Wickens said, breathing heavy. "We need to talk, now." They gathered in the cabin, Mara joining them still in her nightclothes, confused and worried. Webb pulled out a stack of papers, spread them on the table with shaking hands. "I kept digging," Webb said. "Even after you told me to stop, I kept digging. Because something about Consolidated's claim didn't make sense. The timing was too perfect, the documentation too convenient." "Marcus, what did you find?" Cole asked. "Fraud. Systematic, deliberate fraud." Webb pointed to one of the documents. "This survey report they submitted, claiming irregularities in your original deed, it's falsified. I found the actual surveyor they supposedly hired. He never worked for Consolidated, never examined your property. They forged his signature." "That's not all," Patterson added. "I have a cousin in Denver, works at the assayer's office. I asked him to look into Consolidated's mining claims. Turns out half of them are fraudulent too. They've been doing this all over the territory, finding valuable land, fabricating legal problems, forcing people to sell for pennies on the dollar." Wickens picked up the thread. "And it gets better. The federal marshal in Cheyenne, the one Corrigan works for, he's on Consolidated's payroll. Has been for years. That's why Corrigan's been harassing you, trying to build a case that you're unstable and violent. They wanted a pretext to force you off the land if the legal pressure didn't work." Cole sat down heavily, processing the information. "You can prove all this?" "I can prove enough to make it a scandal. Enough to get the territorial governor involved, maybe even federal prosecutors." Webb's eyes were bright with the fervor of a young lawyer who'd found his cause. "But Cole, if we do this, if we go public with what we know, it's going to get ugly. Consolidated will fight back hard. They'll try to discredit us, maybe worse." "Let them try," Patterson said grimly. "I've lived through claim jumpers and corporate raiders before. About time someone stood up to these bastards." Mara spoke up, voice steady despite the shock on her face. "What do you need from us?" "Your testimony, documentation, everything you've experienced, every conversation with Brennan, every incident of sabotage. We build a case so airtight that even bought judges can't ignore it." Webb looked at Cole directly. "And I need you to stay clean. No matter what they do, no matter how they provoke you, you can't give them ammunition. Can you do that?" Cole thought about the guns buried outside, about how close he'd come to digging them up, about the dream that morning, the path he'd almost chosen. "Yeah," he said, "I can do that." They spent the morning documenting everything. Mara's testimony about the attack that had started all this, not Vance's attack, but the subtle warfare Consolidated had waged. The cut fences, the poisoned well, the barn fire. Cole provided dates, details, everything he'd observed at the surveying camp. Webb took it all down, organized it with the evidence he'd already gathered, built it into something that looked like justice might actually exist. Around noon, Brennan arrived as expected, alone this time, confident. He dismounted, walked up to the cabin with a leather folder containing the sale documents. He stopped when he saw the group gathered on the porch. "Mr. Hale, I wasn't expecting a committee." "Mr. Brennan," Webb said, stepping forward. "I'm Marcus Webb, Mr. Hale's legal counsel. We've been reviewing Consolidated's claim, and we have some concerns." Brennan's expression flickered, just a second of uncertainty before the professional mask settled back in place. "I'm sure any concerns can be addressed. We've been very thorough in our documentation." "I'm sure you have been. In fact, you've been so thorough that you even included a survey report from Edmund Hutchins." Webb pulled out one of the documents. The same Edmund Hutchins who's prepared to testify that he never worked for your company, never signed this report, and never examined the Hale property for irregularities. The color drained from Brennan's face. I don't know what you're talking about. I think you do. I also think you know about the forged land office documents, the false mineral reports, and the systematic fraud your company has been perpetrating across the territory. Webb's voice stayed level, professional. We have evidence. We have witnesses. And as of this morning, we have the territorial governor's office very interested in conducting a full investigation. Brennan stood there, the folder hanging limp in his hand. Cole watched him calculate, watched him realize that the easy intimidation campaign had just become a legal nightmare. You're bluffing, Brennan said, but his voice lacked conviction. Try us, Wickens said quietly. Please, try us. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Brennan carefully set the folder down on the porch railing. I'll need to consult with my superiors. You do that, and tell them that every property they've fraudulently acquired, every family they've displaced, it's all going to come out. This isn't just about the Hales anymore. This is about every settler you've cheated. Webb picked up the folder, handed it back to Brennan. The Hales aren't selling. Not now, not ever. And if Consolidated wants to fight this in court, we'll be happy to oblige. Brennan took the folder, climbed back on his horse without another word. Cole watched him right away, watched the distance grow between them and the threat that had been crushing them for months. Is it really over? Mara asked quietly. Not yet, Webb said. They'll try to contain this, try to make it go away quietly, but we've got them backed into a corner. They can either cut their losses and leave, or fight and risk everything coming out publicly. Which do you think they'll choose? Cole asked. Honestly, I think they'll leave. Companies like Consolidated survive by operating in shadows, by keeping their methods quiet. Public scandal, federal investigation, that's poison to them. They'll move on to easier targets. Webb was right. Within a week, Consolidated's surveying camp was abandoned, their equipment hauled away in the night like they'd never been there. Brennan left town without a word. The legal challenges to the Hales' deed were quietly withdrawn. But the story didn't end quietly. Webb made sure of that. The territorial newspaper ran a series of articles exposing Consolidated's methods, naming names, providing documentation. Other families who'd been forced to sell came forward with their own stories. The scandal grew, spreading from Wyoming to Colorado to every territory where Consolidated operated. Federal prosecutors got involved. Several company executives were indicted for fraud. The governor himself visited Redemption, shook Cole's hand on Main Street, praised him for standing up to corporate intimidation. It should have felt like victory, should have felt like justice. But Cole couldn't shake the feeling that they'd gotten lucky, that if Webb hadn't kept digging, if Patterson's cousin hadn't had connections, if any one piece had fallen differently, they'd be gone now. Displaced, defeated, another statistic in Consolidated's campaign of quiet theft. The system hadn't protected them. Luck and persistence and one young lawyer who refused to give up had protected them. The difference mattered. He mentioned this to Wickens one evening, months later, after the legal dust had settled and life had returned to something approaching normal. You're not wrong, Wickens said. The law failed you. Would have failed completely if good people hadn't fought for it to work. That's the truth of it. Justice isn't something that just happens. It's something you have to make happen, over and over, against people who've got more power and money and influence. Feels broken. It is broken, but it's still better than the alternative. Wickens looked at him. You know what the alternative is, Cole. You've lived it. You came real close to living it again. Cole thought about the gun still buried outside, about how close he'd come to becoming that man again. I did. But you didn't. You chose the harder path, the one that required patience and faith and trust in people you barely knew. That counts for something. Maybe it did. Cole wanted to believe it did. Reconstruction started in early spring. With Consolidated gone and some compensation money from the territory for their troubles, Cole and Mara rebuilt. Not just the barn this time, but bigger, better. A real house with multiple rooms, solid construction that would last decades. A proper stable, chicken coop that couldn't be easily destroyed. Fences that would hold. People helped again, but differently this time. Not charity, but community. Neighbors working together because that's what neighbors did. because they'd all learned that standing together was the only way any of them survived. The ranch took shape slowly, built on lessons learned the hard way. Every beam they raised, every nail they hammered felt like an answer to Vance, to Consolidated, to everyone who'd tried to take from them. On a warm evening in late May, Cole and Mara stood on the porch of their new house, their third house on this land, built from ashes and stubbornness and the refusal to be driven out. The sun was setting, painting the plains in colors that never got old. "We did it," Mara said softly. "We did. 3 times now. Built this place 3 times. Hopefully the last time." She laughed, tired but genuine. "Don't jinx it." Cole pulled her close, careful even now of ribs that had healed months ago but would always be tender. "I was thinking about what you said, back when Consolidated was pushing hardest, when you suggested we take their money and leave. I remember. Part of me wanted to run somewhere safe, somewhere we could just be normal." He paused. "But I'm glad we stayed, glad we fought, even though it almost destroyed us. Even though. Because this land, this place, it means something now. We didn't just buy it or inherit it. We earned it. Every inch, every stone, every memory good and bad. It's ours in a way it couldn't have been if we just walked away." Mara was quiet for a moment, then spoke carefully. "The guns are still buried out there, aren't they?" "Yeah." "Are you going to dig them up again?" Cole had thought about this question for months, turned it over in his mind 100 different ways. The easy answer was no. That chapter was closed. He'd proven he could handle problems without violence. But the honest answer was more complicated. "I don't know," he said. "Part of me wants to leave them buried, prove that I'm really done with that life. But part of me thinks keeping them buried is naive, dangerous even. The world's not safe just because we want it to be. So what do you do?" "I guess I accept that they're there if I need them, but I choose not to need them." He looked down at her. "That makes sense?" "More than you know." She smiled. "You're not the man you were when you rode with Vance, but you're not the man you were when we first married either, the one who thought he could just bury his past and pretend it never happened. You're something new, something that includes both those versions but isn't defined by either one." "What am I then?" "You're a man who knows what he's capable of, both the good and the terrible, and chooses the good anyway, even when it's harder, even when the other path would be easier." She squeezed his hand. "That's not weakness, Cole. That's the hardest kind of strength there is." He wanted to believe her, wanted to think that restraint was strength, that choosing not to kill made him more of a man than killing ever had. Maybe in time he'd get there. The summer passed in the kind of quiet productivity that felt almost suspicious after everything they'd been through. They worked the land, tended their growing herd of chickens and the 2 cows they'd managed to buy. Mara's garden flourished, producing more vegetables than they could eat. They sold the surplus in town, started building actual savings instead of just scraping by. Life, slowly, became normal. Then in August, Mara told him she was pregnant. They were sitting at dinner when she said it, casual as commenting on the weather. Cole froze, fork halfway to his mouth. "You're sure?" "I'm sure. Been sure for about a week, but I wanted to wait until I was certain before I told you." She watched his face, anxious despite her calm voice. "Say something." Cole set down his fork, came around the table, pulled her up into his arms. "We're having a baby." "We're having a baby?" He held her, felt the reality of it sink in. A child. Their child. A new life they'd created together, that would grow up on this land they'd fought so hard to keep. The weight of it was terrifying and wonderful in equal measure. "I'm going to be a terrible father," he said. Mara laughed. "Probably. I'll probably be a terrible mother, but we'll figure it out together. What if I can't protect them? What if something like Vance or Consolidated happens again? Then we'll deal with it, like we've dealt with everything else. Together, imperfectly, but with everything we've got." She pulled back, looked him in the eye. "Cole, you can't protect anyone from everything. The world's too big, too random. All you can do is your best and hope it's enough." "What if my best isn't enough?" "Then it isn't. But that doesn't mean you don't try." Simple words, but they cut through the spiral of worry Cole felt building. She was right. He couldn't control everything, couldn't guard against every possible threat. All he could do was build the best life he knew how and hope it was strong enough to weather whatever came. Word spread through town about the pregnancy, and people were genuinely happy for them. Mrs. Chen brought baby clothes her own children had outgrown. Patterson forged a cradle from iron and wood, intricate and beautiful. Even Wickens stopped by with a bottle of whiskey to celebrate, though he warned Cole to save it for after the baby arrived. "You'll need it more then," the sheriff said with a knowing smile. Deputy Marshal Corrigan appeared one last time in September, but it wasn't the hostile visit Cole had learned to expect. The young lawman looked different, chastened maybe, or just tired. "Heard you're expecting," Corrigan said. "Congratulations." "Thanks. I also heard that Marshal Wade was dismissed. Federal investigation found he'd been taking bribes from mining companies, railroads, basically anyone with money." Corrigan shifted his weight, uncomfortable. "I wanted to apologize for how I treated you, for assuming the worst. Wade had me convinced you were dangerous, but I should have seen what was really happening." Cole studied him, looking for the angle, found only genuine regret. "We all make mistakes," Cole said finally. "What matters is what you do after. I'm trying to do better. New Marshal's cleaning house wants everything above board." Corrigan extended his hand. "So, fresh start?" Cole shook it. "Fresh start?" After Corrigan left, Mara commented from the doorway. "You're getting soft in your old age. Maybe. Or maybe I just don't want to spend my life holding grudges against everyone who wrongs me. Gets exhausting." "When did you get wise?" "About 5 minutes ago. Don't expect it to last." She laughed, and the sound was better than any victory Cole had ever won. The baby came in late March, after a labor that terrified Cole more than any gunfight ever had. Mara was in pain, real pain, and there was nothing he could do except hold her hand and try not to show how scared he was. Doc Morrison delivered the child with practiced efficiency, and suddenly there was a new sound in the world. A baby crying, angry and alive and impossibly small. "It's a girl," Morrison announced, wrapping the infant in a clean blanket. Healthy, strong lungs, all her fingers and toes. He handed the baby to Mara, who looked down at their daughter with an expression of wonder and exhaustion. "She's perfect," Mara whispered. Cole leaned over, looked at this tiny person they'd created. She had Mara's nose, his stubborn chin, a full head of dark hair. She was wrinkled and red and the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. "What should we name her?" he asked. Mara thought for a moment. "Grace, because that's what she is. Grace we didn't earn but got anyway." Grace Hale. It fit. Cole held his daughter for the first time with hands that had killed 7 men, that had pulled triggers and dealt violence, that carried more history than he wished they did. But in that moment, holding this new life, none of that mattered. What mattered was being gentle, being present, being the father she deserved. It wouldn't be perfect. He'd make mistakes, lose his temper, disappoint her in countless ways. But he'd try. Every day, he'd try to be better than he was, to give her a life that wasn't defined by his past. That was all anyone could do. The first year was hard in ways Cole hadn't anticipated. Sleepless nights, constant worry, the terrifying responsibility of keeping this small person alive and healthy. But it was also joyful in ways he'd forgotten existed. Grace's first smile, her first laugh, the way she'd grip his finger with her whole hand, trusting him completely, despite having no reason to. The ranch prospered. They expanded their livestock, bought more land from a neighbor who was retiring, built a future that could support a family, maybe even siblings for Grace someday. The territorial investigation into Consolidated ended with indictments and prison sentences for the executives who'd orchestrated the fraud. The company itself was dismantled, its assets sold to pay restitution to the families they'd displaced. It wasn't perfect justice, nothing ever was, but it was something. Other mining companies learned the lesson, started operating more carefully, or at least more subtly. The pattern would probably repeat somewhere else, with different names but the same tactics. That was the nature of power and greed. But for now, in this place, people like Cole and Mara had won. Had proven that ordinary people could stand up to money and influence if they were willing to fight for it. On Grace's first birthday, they had a small celebration. Just close friends. Wickens, Patterson, Morrison, Webb, a handful of neighbors who'd become family through shared struggle. Nothing fancy, just cake and coffee and people who cared about each other. Cole stood on his porch that evening after everyone had left, holding Grace while she dozed against his shoulder. Mara was inside cleaning up, humming something tuneless and happy. The land stretched out before him, familiar and hard-won. The house stood solid behind him, built to last. His daughter breathed steady and warm against his chest, completely trusting, completely safe. This was what he'd fought for. Not revenge, not even justice, exactly. This, the ability to stand on his own land with his family, building something good out of materials that included both beauty and ugliness, triumph and failure. He thought about the guns still buried out there somewhere, wrapped in oilcloth, waiting. He'd never dug them up again after that last time, never even been tempted. Maybe someday he'd dig them up just to destroy them properly, eliminate the temptation entirely. Or maybe he'd leave them there, a reminder of who he'd been and who he'd chosen not to be. Either way, they didn't define him anymore. Mara came out, wrapped her arms around him from behind, careful not to wake Grace. They stood there together as the sun set, as it had hundreds of times before and would hundreds of times again. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "Everything? Nothing." He paused. "How lucky we are." "Lucky? Cole, we've been attacked, burned out, threatened, nearly destroyed half a dozen times." "I know. But we're still here, still together, still building." He shifted Grace slightly, felt her stir and settle. "That's luck, or grace, or whatever you want to call it." Mara was quiet for a moment, then spoke softly. "Do you ever regret it? Staying here, fighting instead of running?" "Sometimes. When things get hard, when I'm tired and frustrated and wondering if it's all worth it." He turned to look at her. "But then I see what we've built, see Grace growing up on land that's really ours, and I know we made the right choice, even if it was the harder one." "The harder choices usually are the right ones. Doesn't make them easier, though." "No, but that's what makes them worth making." They went inside as full dark settled, as the stars came out over Wyoming plains that had seen so much struggle and survival. Inside, the house was warm and bright, filled with the small sounds of home. Dishes being washed, floorboards creaking, a baby breathing soft and steady. Cole had been a lot of things in his life. A killer, a fighter, a man running from his past. But standing there in the home he'd built 3 times over, with his wife and daughter safe, and the future stretching out uncertain but possible, he was finally something else. He was a man who'd found his way home. Not to a place, though the land mattered. Not to peace, because peace was always temporary and hard-won, but to a version of himself he could live with, could be proud of, could pass on to his daughter without shame. That was worth more than any revenge, any victory, any amount of money or power. That was worth everything. Outside, the wind moved through the plains, carrying the smell of sage and wildflowers, of rain coming from the mountains. The land continued on, indifferent to human struggle, outlasting everyone who tried to claim it. But for now, for this moment, it was home. And sometimes that was enough.